What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to RPO in general as we kick off the season with an unusual stream, a first of its kind, as we go through fantasy football, its ups and downs in a wild, nutty 20-team fantasy draft, which is exactly why, since I'm going to be doing this on stream, where everybody can watch me and pick up on exactly what I'm doing and all my tendencies, I brought in an expert. That's who I've got above me. It's none other than Windy City Gridiron's own Jeff Burkus, a very level-headed, very, very good fantasy football player and great football mind to help me try and see if I can crack out a winner here amongst a massive field. Jeff, how you feeling about this?
20 teams is unbelievably ridiculous. I think that honestly you could have just played two 10-team leagues and just gone with it that way. But you guys are going big. You're not going home. You are going big. So we will see if we can try to navigate this crazy draft that you have set up with. I'm fascinated to see what the first few picks are. You said you have pick 7. We're trying to talk a little strategy before we started live streaming. It'll be interesting to see what the first few picks are going to be.
Yep. I am very curious to see myself. Joel, you ask, how do you join? The answer is, it looks like things are closed for now, but when we get things rolling, I'm sure next year I'll let you know. It was through the Discord, like the RPO Discord, but we can get to that in a little bit, because I'm with you, JB. This is crazy. This is nutty, but it kind of added to the spectacle of it. It's my first PPR league, so I don't mind having you to hold my hand here. I've always tended to play that standard format, but truth be told, ever since I really got started analyzing the Bears, I didn't make a ton of time for fantasy football, so it's been interesting getting back to it where I start to look at not just, oh, hey, that player's a nice scheme fit there. Ooh, they'll do really well with him. But as excited as I could be about, for instance, Hunter Renfrow, he's still not going to be the Raiders' number one option over there. So regardless of players within their role, you have to remember what you're drafting for. Oh, hopefully I didn't tip too much because it is a PPR league, and you're right now that I think about it. Renfro's 5 catches and 53 yards per game, at least sometimes it feels that way, could make a lot bigger impact in this kind of format than a standard one, especially with 20 teams.
I mean, the good thing about PPR, I think it has its negatives as well, but the good thing about PPR is that it opens up more playable fantasy players. So your third down backs, your guys that are the more possession type guys that maybe aren't red zone threats or maybe aren't game breakers, they can have a role on your roster, especially in a deep league or in the super deepest league of all time, the 20 teamer that you have put together here. So that does open things up and it makes it interesting. I will say that I don't know where Hunter Renfrow would go, but I think that he's still a draftable player. And so, yeah, it opens up a lot of options. And I think, man, I'm really interested to see what happens here. Really interested to see what happens here.
You just used the phrase draftable player as if Renfrow isn't going to make the category. I did the math at one point. It is 300 picks, if memory serves, just going off of 15 rounds. So if it's 16 rounds, which might actually be more normal, we're looking at 320 picks. The definition has expanded. Assuming that everybody in this roster takes like 2 quarterbacks, you're talking about picking up rookies. Somebody's probably going to draft Mitch. You gotta assume it's going to happen. Like in a Chicago Bears league here, like there is a whole lot of guys that are going to come off the board eventually. And if anything, it feels like those first couple picks might make all the difference, because whereas normally you would scoop this or that person like way late or off the waiver wire, you don't get that luxury here that you might in a 10 or 8 team league, because there's a decent chance that everybody gets drafted. Not everybody, but you get what I mean. Like, yeah. There's only so many names that can go around before somebody drafts Jesper Horsted. Well, hey, he had a huge fantasy night last night. It doesn't count for nothing, but you'd win.
Tight ends, 20 teams. I doubt people will roster 2, or if they do, probably not going to get down to Jesper Horsted. But, someone might take Jimmy Graham because he's going to get a touchdown every now and then, right? So in a normal draft, you're not going to see Jimmy Graham drafted, but I could see that happening tonight.
I can't wait. We've got what looks like about 7 minutes and 40 seconds before we get started. If you were going to just talk through, because I'm still hammering out the Windy City Gridiron article, but so if you were going to talk through general strategy that, again, if this was just your team and your team alone, you would be walking through. Like, how do you come at a league this big or even just general fantasy overall?
Yeah, I think the first thing, and it was the first thing I asked you, was what are the rules? What's your setup, right? How many players are starting? So is it 4 points for a touchdown for a quarterback throwing touchdown, or is it 6? Is it, you know, uh, PPR, half PPR? Is it points per first down league, right? Understand the rules of your league. I really like points per first down, by the way. That's a good league setup. I think it's a little bit more, feels a little bit more real to the game rather than a point per perception where a guy could get a point catching a 1 yard swing pass out of the backfield. That doesn't feel like just compensation for that play. But first downs seem to have value in football, and giving them value in fantasy football makes more sense. But anyway, I digress. So understand your league setup. So that would be one thing. Second thing would be understand the people that you're drafting with. If you're in an open league, in a public league, you're not going to know that, right? But if you're in a friends league, a friends and family league, if it's casual, you're going to know the people. And if it's a league that recurs year after year, you're going to have an idea of how people draft. You're going to know that crazy Chiefs fan is going to just try to fill his entire roster of Chiefs. And so if you really wanted to get Mahomes or Kelsey or something like that, you're going to have to snipe them before that person has the opportunity to do that. So understanding the people that you draft with, understanding their tendencies can be a good thing. Honestly, like running through mock drafts is a really nice way to see how the board could potentially fall. So if you're really looking to kind of understand how to draft from, say, the end of the first round in a 12-team league, I've got the 12th pick. What do my teams look like if I go running back right away and then try to fill out my roster? Or what does it look like if I go running back, wide receiver? What does it look like if I try to take Kelsey at the end of the first round? Am I setting myself up for failure at another position? Those can be good things. It takes work. A lot of people aren't willing to do that, but at least it gives you a little bit of a feel of how boards might fall when the time comes for your draft. Now, in a 20-team monster draft, I don't know. I've never even heard of anything like this. So I don't have any great strategy for you. The thing that I'm worried about with us here for your team, Robert, is what's going to happen at quarterback. Are there going to be quarterbacks that come off the board really early? And if that happens, then is that going to push us to want to take a quarterback? Or do we want to take one of these top running backs because in a 20-team league, they're even going to be more scarce than normal to try to fill those running back spots? Or in a PPR league, do you try to take one of the top guys who you think is just going to be worth it from a scoring standpoint to anchor your team? Guy like Devante Adams, I would never suggest drafting because he plays for Green Bay, and I don't draft for Green Bay players, but he's going to score a lot of fantasy points. He's going to be a good draft pick for somebody that doesn't mind getting the sliminess of Green Bay on them. So that's something that we have to consider as well. There's basically 3 tight ends that are elite. You've got Kelsey, you've got Kittle, and you've got Darren Waller. After that, there's a big drop off, and you're trying to play in the second tier. And so, is it defensible to try to go after a tight end early because you have basically a wide receiver at the tight end position where everybody else is, more rostering a more prototypical tight end production wise. So there are definitely some interesting ways to break down the league. Running backs are typically thought of as less bankable in some respects because they can get injured. But there are so few guys that match that high level of talent with the volume of opportunity and a history of production. The Christian McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook, Saquon Barkley is incredibly talented. I don't know how much I love the Giants offense. Alvin Kamara has great history. Derrick Henry's obviously been incredibly productive. Those 5 running backs kind of stand above for me. Then it kind of takes a step down to the man in your backyard, Ezekiel Elliott, who's obviously incredibly talented, was hurt, off and on last year, hasn't been quite the Zeke of a couple of years ago. In PPR, I love Austin Eckler. I think he's an excellent choice and an offense that I think is going to just grow by leaps and bounds. Jonathan Taylor, I think, could have a really good year over in Indianapolis. And so you've got some really good running backs in those first and second tiers, and then it kind of drops off. Once you get past maybe the top, round and at mid of round 2, you start to just really question yourself if you're taking a Chris Carson or a Chase Edmonds or a Myles Gaskin or somebody like that. That's a tough player to count on as your RB1 in a 20-team league. So it's fascinating to see what's going to happen. You're not going to have a strong roster from top to bottom. So you want to think about it from the other respect too. In a 20-team league like this, what should you do in terms of like, where can I take chances?
Right.
Like where can I find a deep sleeper, if you will? It's not sleeper in a 20-team league, but where do you think that you can find value? Do you think it's in the wide receiver position? Do you think that you can stock up on backup running backs and assume that a starter goes down from injury or takes over? Are you comfortable playing chicken with the quarterback position and trying to get a couple of skill players, and then maybe trying to say you take Ryan Fitzpatrick, who I love. Let's say you take him, and then you take a guy like Fields or Lance, who's not going to start right away. You take them and hope that you maybe eat it for a couple weeks, and then you get the rookie to come in. You're probably going to have to pay more premium picks for that.
Oh yeah, I will be shocked, JB, just to throw it out there. Like, if we get to pick 33 and Lance isn't gone, it's going to be on my mind, because the 49ers are so run heavy that having a quarterback that could go, what would you say, like 275 yards, 3 scores with an added 80 yards and 2 touchdowns is just too tantalizing in a league
that's
this
a monster
thin.
Game.
Like,
right.
Oh, it's a monster game, but if San Fran's playing a cupcake team, like, it's always on the table. I mean, I hate to say this, but given what we've seen with the Bears cornerbacks so far this year,
welcome to the best day of the year.
Schedule,
draft
so
day.
Who's to say, like, what it's going to look like?
And he'll have a role early. Lance is going to have a role early. He's going to be in, he'll have a package of plays. And so, not that you'd want a small amount for your quarterback the first few weeks, because any fantasy league is a week-to-week league. Like, you're trying to, make sure that you're putting your roster in the best position to succeed each and every week. And so you will make moves throughout the season. That the second draft is important too, right? The first draft, where you actually put your initial roster together, is incredibly important.
Mm-hmm.
But you're gonna want to be active on a waiver wire.
Right.
I don't know how deep a waiver wire is going to be, 20 teams deep, but you still are going to want to be active and look for players that you can add to your team. So there are guys that always emerge every year out of nowhere. Some undrafted free agent that
always
don't know where James Robinson was at this point last year, but he had a huge year.
He wasn't on people's minds, that's for sure. And he ended up having, like you said, a monster year. And it looks like, JB, we are in it. The draft is started. I know that it's a little behind on your part, so let's see. I see why. Okay, I'm very curious as to why specifically it's... Okay, no, here we go. Perfect. Now my window's working. We are in it. First pick off the board is Christian McCaffrey. Are you surprised, or are you looking at it like, yeah, no, that's probably the choice?
It's a great way to start a team. The only thing that I've been questioning is whether or not people are going to start taking quarterbacks early, just because of that fear of missing out on a quarterback, especially if you have to wait 40 picks to come back to you.
To pick an example, just like right where you're talking about, in even traditional fantasy scoring, Russell Wilson's a monster. Always has been. Like, not only does he have a penchant for being Seattle's entire offense, but because he's got any running threat at all, it just adds the threat of him just going off. And 28 points is the difference between more than likely winning and losing in a league like this. Looks like we've got Dalvin Cook and Josh Allen immediately off the board after that. Josh Allen's a very interesting pick. Is that exactly what you're talking about? Like trying to find that MVP quarterback that's just going to carry the roster?
Yeah, I'm not shocked. That person's clearly thinking about it from what I've been thinking about. Well, you told me 18 teams earlier, and then it's 20. And so it just kept getting like more and more like, And so, yeah, to me, it's Mahomes and Allen are the two guys that I feel most comfortable with taking early. I think they're bulletproof in terms of the best that you can get in terms of trying to get a top 5 fantasy quarterback.
Okay, so here we are. We are one pick away from drafting because remember, you are also, assuming you're watching the stream, on a delay. And there's somebody I've got in mind if we get...
Who's the first 5 picks?
First 5 picks are McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook, Josh Allen, Kamara, and Travis Kelce.
Okay, wow.
So that's my younger brother, by the way, who took Kelce. I don't know what he was thinking, but... I think he's thinking just tight end and the fact that it's a huge focus of the offense. Looks like we just lost somebody who was the pick ahead of us. They took Derrick Henry, which is a real bummer because that made a lot of sense to me. But so now we are on the clock, JB. We got 45 seconds. The first people up here, like we've got Ezekiel Elliott, Devante Adams, Saquon Barkley, Jonathan Taylor, Nick Chubb. What are you thinking? Because my head says if we wanted to go running back, I feel like Chubb is right up there with Henry in terms of he's going to be the focal point of the Cleveland offense. And I'm worried about Aaron Jones having a down year or Ezekiel Elliott ending up replaced based on the fact that the Cowboys kind of got used to life without him last year. What are you thinking?
Okay. I'd say if you want to take care of quarterback now, you take Mahomes. If you want a running back, I would say Austin Eckler.
Quick, make your pick.
PPR.
Let's see. Let's go with, oh boy. Okay, so we're going to go with Chubb. I hate that, but I obviously wasn't ready. I'm fine living with Chubb, by the way, but Eckler was a great idea. I went to go type him in, and I took too long. So I'll own that one, and we'll have this cleaned up organizationally by the next round. Sound good?
Yeah, well, it doesn't matter.
See, this is exactly why, JV, I wanted to have you along. So
yeah, make sure that you get us an update right before so I can kind of get an idea.
Yeah.
But I think the thing about Chubb, and I love Chubb, I think he's the best running back in terms of traditional running back.
Oh, you're right. It's because it's because I left out the PPR aspect, isn't it?
Yes. And you have the competition with Kareem Hunt, so that he doesn't have maybe quite the volume that Derrick Henry has from a pure running back standpoint, which is why I think Henry's probably a little bit more of a valuable back in the fantasy purposes. I do think Chubb's just a better runner. And then I think when you add in the PPR element, he's just not going to give you as much juice. But if that's why a guy like Alvin Kamara, Christian McCaffrey, those guys are so valuable is because they do so much in the passing game. And to me, Austin Eckler is right there. Austin Eckler is going to basically be the Chargers version of Alvin Kamara this year.
Right. By the way, I have figured out a way to get a screen window going. So join the link that I have sent you, and I think everything will start to make sense. But go through that. We're gonna be a little sneaky right here as we go. It'll be interesting to see what happens here. So what do we got? Yeah. I love the fact, by the way, that my brother actually went through this and just hard picked Travis Kelce. Hey, live or die by it. Why not, right? Let's see here. Let me get things set up for our secret plan. And if I get this going, you should have a clean view at... Oh boy. Okay, so there it is. That should work. Click that link, and you should be able to see a live stream that isn't delayed, JB, as we get right back to the fantasy stuff so that you can watch things go as they go. All right, so, and Attila, to be clear, it is going to be PPR. We're going to make it PPR if you are on the stream because we just we ended up making the change about 45 minutes before the draft, and ESPN's fantasy settings don't let you make them within the hour because, quote unquote, the draft opens about an hour before. So we're playing it by ear. Looks like, by the way, picks in order since Chubb: Devante Adams, followed by Tyreek Hill, followed by Ezekiel Elliott, followed by Saquon Barkley, Pat Mahomes, Aaron Jones, George Kittle, and Austin Eckler. Sound about chalk so far?
I mean, I think it's good value on Eckler. For what number did he go?
He went 15.
Yeah, I mean that's a pretty good pick there.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't look. I either don't have an account.
Oh yeah, you might want to make
radio.
one. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
For those wondering what the big secret plan is, entirely it's a Discord server that I just set up. So here's JB being introduced to Discord for the first time. Hey, Elon, you can't just come on stream and ask what the sleeper pick is, okay? We have to get to the sleepers when we get to the sleepers. But I do think that it is interesting, like when we talk about these PPR things, I hear what you're saying. I really wish that I'd thought of beforehand, like rewarding first downs more, because I have always thought that chain movers can struggle in fantasy pseudo-arbitrarily, right? Like touchdowns become dominant, but hey, that's the way of things. But once you really start to dig into it, I think there are going to be plenty of players that, for instance, JB could catch 5 balls for 35 yards, 2 first downs, and end up having a big impact in games like this, you know?
Right. All right, I accepted your...
Perfect. Join Secret Plan, the channel.
Got it.
And then you should have a separate live stream right there that you can take a look at.
I'll put it on my phone because I have Discord on my phone.
Perfect.
So we'll do...
You'll be able, at that point, to see the draft window. That's the whole goal of this. Looks like Maserati Mitch, by the way, is on the clock. Props to the fantasy name, going hardcore. By the way, we've got Jonathan Taylor, Najee Harris, Stephon Diggs, and Calvin Ridley. 1, 2, 3, 4 after that pick 15. So now you'll be able to see how things are coming along. One thing I am really interested in is when it comes to like daily fantasy, basically, like how things will work going forward, because I feel like daily fantasy is, I mean, obviously it's exploding, but the week-to-week stuff makes DFS so interesting to the point where I'm almost surprised that there hasn't been created like a whole fantasy setup. Maybe there has, and I'm just not paying attention. Like a standard fantasy league that was DFS. So you redrafted every single week. But I don't know.
Yeah, well, there's
Thanks,
some
Max, by the way.
Specialized channels or apps that will do you redraft every week. That's a little bit niche. We did run through Windy City Gridiron. I set up a couple of leagues over the last 2 years where it was daily fantasy league. So you would pick based off of an account, $100 or $1,000, whatever it was, and then you would build your team off of that the software gives a value for each player, and then you would compete over the entire year the amount of points that you got on your weekly lineups. And so I like that approach. It's fun, and it's definitely very different. All right, so I'm on this channel, but I don't see a link.
So you should see that I am streaming a screen. So if you access that screen or that stream, you will see the ESPN info. Also, I just moved the little support the show bit, which, by the way, yes, supporting RPO is really awesome. Helps me know what you do and don't want, whether it's between live stream content, edited breakdowns. There are a whole lot of asks, and I want to try to be the best creator that I can. So anything helps, but hopefully the chat box should show up a little better now. We're coming up with all this on the fly. For those of you who are paying attention, fun little fact, what WCG, including Jeff and plenty of the shows that he's doing, are trying to move towards live streaming our podcast recordings with potential Q&A after the fact. Obviously, that's going to depend show to show, but basically trying to get into doing things live so that there's a video component and then posting the podcast channel afterwards. So shows like Bear With Me and Rule of Three will be coming to this channel, specifically RPO, to keep you updated on post-game thoughts and a breakdown a little bit away. Obviously, I'm going to try to get back to my Wednesday night habits of going through the All-22, assuming there is All-22 to break down, and then whatever else we can come up with. But JB, I know you're looking to move Bears Over Beers to live too, right?
We want to have a live component. We may or may not actually record the podcast itself live, but EJ and I, every week, we have a little bit of a chat beforehand. Sometimes that can be 5 minutes. Sometimes that can be 45 minutes. If you've ever talked to EJ, you would not be surprised about that.
It can become 2 hours really fast.
Yes. And then we'll normally record our podcast, and then we usually sit on and talk for quite a while. And I think that there's some really interesting stuff that we end up talking about after we hit the stop button. Mm-hmm. And I think it'd be kind of fun to flip on the live stream part of it and bring everybody in and say, yeah, we just spoke to this person about the upcoming game. That person had a lot of really cool information. We talked about this, what questions you guys have about the upcoming game, because we're going to be doing more team previews, game previews. And so I think that there's some fun stuff to be had. It'll probably be Wednesday nights or something like that throughout the year.
Stop the presses. We've got David Montgomery selected. David Montgomery going, what is that? Round 2, pick 7 right here, which, actually that would sound pretty high in like an 8-team league, but right now it sounds about right. You know what I mean? We've got probably a couple others that you could think of, especially given its PPR. Guys like Calvin Ridley, Joe Mixon is an interesting one to draft as early as they did, but hey, you never know, especially with Burrow not being the world's greatest deep thrower in the world. You got to think that he's going to work with his running backs quite a bit. I feel like Clyde Edwards-Helaire went a bit early at R2P3. What are you thinking?
Well, I mean, you want a piece of that Kansas City offense. So he's still, third or fourth option. I mean, I don't hate it.
I can't figure out their running back room. I mean, I think they want CEH to be like the big guy, but I know that having him last year, I was expecting a bigger piece of the Kansas City pie than I felt like I got. You know what I mean? Sure.
And sometimes that happens with rookies. And so, you come into the second year and they know the offense. They're not going to be taken off for any kind of reason, pass blocking or anything like that. So you never know. Second year running back, usually hit their stride.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of running back, going back to David Montgomery, I think what'll make this really, really intriguing is the Bears' offensive line situation, which, suffice to say, not to turn this into a post-game podcast, because we've already gone there, but that's going to be a real question mark, especially given the fact that the Bears have the Ravens on the schedule, the Bucks on the schedule, Green Bay's obviously on the schedule, and they don't have so bad a defensive line. And so then when you add like Los Angeles, the Rams specifically, the Niners defensive line is stout, the Browns are ridiculous. Like, there's a lot of things going on in terms of like where games that I would say David Montgomery has a decently high chance to struggle. What do you think?
Well, a lot of times I like to take running backs just off of their offensive line. I mean, generally fantasy, I always think of it as talent meets opportunity, right? Mm-hmm. So if you have a highly talented player,
clearly talented, like we should say that out of the gate.
Absolutely. If you have a highly talented player in a highly productive offense, obviously those guys are the ones that you want, right? And then you start sort of making concessions, right? Well, maybe he's not the most talented player, but he's in a highly productive offense. Well, maybe he's a really great player, but he's in a pretty bad offense. And right now, it's hard to have a ton of confidence in the Bears offense. They're going to have a quarterback change at some point. Obviously, we think that that's going to really benefit Justin Fields when he comes in. It's going to benefit the offense, we think, but there's still going to be rookie quarterback growing pains and all that kind of stuff. The real problem, though, is there any kind of consistency with this offensive line? You've already had an injury. You cut Charles Leno. We can leave that for another time. But you've definitely you're putting out an offensive line that has never played together. Daniel's coming back from injury. Your best player is probably your left guard. Mustafa is an undrafted free agent that's trying to stick in the league. he looks like that to me. Like, I don't think that he's this stalwart player at this point. I hope he can develop into that. You've got Jermaine Ifedi, who washed out of Seattle, who's trying to reinvent himself in Chicago. I mean, Jason Peters is my age.
We're on the clock again, by the way.
Oh, geez, you got to cut me off.
So
the top available.
We've got, oh, shoot. Okay, so somebody just took Allen Robinson, of course. If we take a look at quarterbacks, we've got Kyler, Dak, Lamar, Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson. Like, we got plenty of options there.
Put Kyler in your queue and then tell me about wide receivers.
Sure. Okay, so we've got, like, CeeDee Lamb, Keenan Allen, Robert Woods, Adam Thielen, Josh Jacobs, is not a wide receiver, Amari Cooper, Tyler Lockett. Part of me thinks that we could try to take one of these Carolina wide receivers, like, at pick 47. What are you thinking?
I would say either you take Kyler, get the quarterback situation, or Keenan Allen. I would love Keenan Allen.
Quick, make your pick.
I'm going to take Allen. I think Allen's a great choice because, like you're saying, I feel like Keenan Allen and Allen Robinson are right there next to each other.
They're the same player.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. And so, especially in a PPR setting, I feel like they've got a lot of value that we can add. And then we can try to see if we can pull out, I don't know, something like I'm trying to figure out about whether or not we should do the quarterback now or whether we should try to bank on one of these rookies and see if we can't shore up more wide receiver talent, try to get like another A1 running back. You get the idea. Like, try to get other stuff settled. I can't tell because I don't know what's going to be there. Like, what is this? Next pick is pick 47. After that is probably going to be pick 63, something like that. Like, this is insanity. This is nuts.
Yes, it is nuts, and it's your league, so
it's fun.
I would say that. So, how many quarterbacks have been taken? I still can't access this secret plan stuff. So, what quarterbacks have been taken?
Quarterbacks that have been taken. Let's see. So this is.
And let me say, Audrey, I did not clown your pick. That was Robert that clowned.
That was unfortunately me. That's me being mad. Okay, Audrey. I'm just upset at
it was
at Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
Oh, okay, got it. Yeah.
But so we've got Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, and Kyler all off the board.
Okay, so
Kyler first pick around 3.
Okay.
I'm
so
surprised
only 3 quarterbacks.
I'm surprised as many are making it this far down the chain, to be honest, because it seems as if everybody, probably rightly so, is focused on adding like that high-level receiver talent. But again, I'll say it and hope that we don't get absolutely like schemed out of our minds here, Jeff. I feel like DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson are both going to offer a ton of PPR value that maybe we could get later. So it's just a matter until both of them get picked.
Well, so here's the good thing about taking a wide receiver, a running back, and then a wide receiver is that you now have one at each position. You start 2 total, right? So you're two running backs, 2 wide receivers, and then a flex position. Mm-hmm. So now you're in a position where you've done kind of an even build. And if you feel like you have to grab another running back or you have to grab another wide receiver, you can do it and know that you can grab this later. I think that there are fewer running backs that you can count on, and so I would probably want to take a running back before I take a second wide receiver. Mm-hmm. And I would also still am worried about quarterback situation.
I was going to say,
if we send quarterback down again, we're going to have to wait 26 picks, right?
I feel like a quarterback is the next sensible selection for us. You know,
you've got 12 teams behind you that one of them has a quarterback. So you have 11 teams that need a quarterback behind you. Mm-hmm. if you pass on it in the 3rd round, you could be getting down into,
and they all get 2 picks if I'm doing the math correctly.
Well, yeah, they get 2 picks. They're probably not going to take 2 quarterbacks, but
it's more to say they get 2 shots at a quarterback.
Yes, right. So
we're on the clock now. I'm thinking, okay, so Dak, Lamar, Rodgers, Wilson, and maybe Herbert. But if I'm looking at it and thinking like I'm between Russ and Lamar, because something about Dak's shoulder right now really worries me. And maybe I'm just being too panicked, but what do you think?
I love Lamar just because of the running. He's an elite runner. You're never going to get a runner like that anywhere else. I mean, to me, that's a fascinating guy to have on your team. Fun to root for too. Great highlight reel. Russ really kind of went downhill at the end of last year. They'll probably be great, but Lamar's got this unique skill set.
Oh, here's a question. What if we rode Wilson, who plays like an MVP early,
Quick, make your
and then
pick.
swapped to... Now I'll just take Lamar. It's easier.
Okay.
With 5 seconds left, it's an easy selection, right? Because I think, personally, he's the best athlete in the NFL, like right now. That obviously is a very weird statement, because when you look at best athlete, you get real subjective. Like Khalil Mack you've coined the phrase, carved out of granite. So is he the best athlete in the NFL? Depends on the perspective. But Lamar, in terms of just agility meets size meets ferocity meets speed, it's nuts. You know what I mean?
I love Lamar. I mean, I love watching him play. I like having him on my fantasy teams. I'm fine with it. Now, the good news is now we don't have to worry about quarterback.
Right.
Now we can just hammer these skill positions and just take the best player available. We don't have to worry about quarterback.
Right.
So you have to give me a little bit more warning. Don't let me talk through it, but you have to give me a little more warning and start,
Yep.
And anytime I'm in a fantasy draft, what I like to do is keep my queue loaded with players that I like. And so as it gets closer, I can see, I'm 4 picks away. And so I know I'm going to get one of these 4 guys. Then I start like prioritizing, a few picks out where it's like, okay, I've got these guys. I really like them. Okay, that guy just got taken. It's going to be one of these 3 guys. Oh, somebody else got taken. So now I'm down to I like these 2 guys, right? And so when I'm on the clock, my pick's usually made within 2 seconds because I know what I want as we're getting closer to the pick. I can't see this yet or ever. Maybe this is just how it's going to be.
Try looking at this. So when you look at the streamed screen, what do you see?
Well, it's very small, but I can.
That's the trouble. If you threw it onto a desktop, what do you see?
Well, I just have it on my laptop. It's blurry, so it is what it is.
Let's see.
It's a little better, so I can see like Lockett looks like the best player.
Lockett, Lockett's the one on the very top, and
right.
I have no idea. Part of me almost thinks that Lockett, well, he's off the board now, so there you go. But I was gonna say, part of me thinks that one to bet on. I know that a whole lot of people aren't going to have tons of faith in Teddy Bridgewater, but I feel like these Denver wide receivers are going to get a lot of work. Like, whether it's Sutton or Judy, I feel like they are going to be very, very, very solid number 2 wide receivers. What do you think?
I mean, they're incredibly talented. They're going to split targets in an offense that may not be as explosive as you might like because they're led by a defensive head coach. Well, yes, but they're led by a defensive head coach Vic Fangio, who is going to have an elite defense, and he's going to probably want to run. Yeah,
Rodgers and Wilson, by the way, just came off the board. I love the Ayuk selection. Whoever picked that, I feel like Brandon Ayuk could explode this year. Kyle Pitts is an interesting selection that we've also had off the board. This is a very action-heavy league right now. Like, obviously, that's going to happen with 20 teams, but it's wild to monitor, Yeah,
Ayuk I love. Whoever took that pick, that's a guy that I think could really explode. I think he's rated pretty close to Deebo Samuel, his teammate, in a lot of places, but I would have that separation a little bit more. I think Ayuk's going to take more of a lion's share of that offense, and it's a really good offense to get involved with.
Yep, to say the least. Chase Edmonds is one that I haven't been able to wrap my head around because, frankly, I feel like Arizona and the Bears have had a little bit of kinship in terms of how poorly they've been able to run the ball. I'm very interested to see what happens to Chase Edmonds, but that's an offense that I've said this for 3 years now, but it should get going at some point, right?
I don't know. 2 years ago, Kingsbury's running offense looked really good, but the passing offense has been terrible, and it's really Kyler just make something happen. And that's not really a dependable offense. And so I struggle. They have a lot of wide receivers, so it's tough to want to invest in the wide receiver group. Murray's incredible, but you're betting on these fun plays, these ad-lib plays. I'm not sure I believe in Kingsbury. I mean, I think that he could be on the hot seat here soon.
We've got Elon talking about how he's just stewing right now, coming up on a sleeper pick, which, by the way, hilarious that we're already talking about sleepers in round 4, but that's where we are. So this is just such a goofy. I can't wait to see what happens in like round 10 as we really get down to it, because this gives you and me a chance, Jeff. I feel like when I'm done with my fantasy draft every year, I'm getting really good players around like the 15th round, like the kinds of guys that obviously I would love to add these guys to the Bears, because when you talk like the 100th most productive skill position player, that's still a pretty productive player, but we're going to dip real deep, you know?
Absolutely. I'm wondering if you can pull up the best available running backs.
Oh, sure thing. Let's take a look. That's quarterbacks. We don't need those. Mike Davis over in Atlanta, Myles Gaskin, Darrell Henderson, obviously questionable, Sony Michel, Raheem Mostert. I've got one on my mind. What are you thinking?
Well, I don't know how many people that are drafting ahead of us here are watching the show. And so we have to probably be somewhat careful here. But
you can always feel free to message me in Discord if you want
okay.
like something really extra sneaky. But yeah.
Well, I can text you too.
You sure could.
That ability.
Mostert had a really big run today. I feel like SF has a ton of running backs though. Like it's not as simple as just Mostert.
Yes, it's an interesting group to think about. So I would worry a little bit about. I love Darrell Henderson, but he's a home run hitter, and wouldn't be the worst RB2 to have. I would worry a little bit about. I don't know how much to worry about Sony Michel. So
that's
take
what I'm thinking.
Yeah, that Cam Akers injury opens up the opportunity.
Would have been. TJ Hawkinson off the board. Tight end's starting to get thinner and thinner and thinner, by the way.
Well, pull up the tight ends. I think that you're gonna be playing a guy that hoping for spiking a touchdown every week. So pull up the tight end availability.
We've got Logan Thomas, Noah Fant, Robert Tonyan, Dallas Goedert, Mike Gesicki, which, by the way, the Miami thing is hilarious because while I think it's a little weird, if I could be really honest, that Miami's talking trades in the middle of obviously all the Deshaun Watson drama, it is definitely a really interesting fantasy perspective if you wanted to bet on that trade happening. But that's really a right now thing. In a couple days, we should know whether these reports are made up or not, you know?
Yeah, I don't like any of these guys available. And so to me, I would rather keep hitting on the wide receivers and running backs.
I agree.
Because eventually we'll just get somebody and we'll just hope that they score touchdowns.
Cole Kmet, baby. Or somebody like Dallas Goedert sticks out to me. I think he's primed for a good season. But like I bet you're about to say, that all depends on Philadelphia's quarterback play, you know?
Yes, and that we do not know what that is.
No, we don't.
So, all right, go back to wide receivers.
Wide out.
I think we can wait on wide receivers, especially since this is coming back to us now. So we can probably wait 12 picks. But I just kind of want to see what that looks like.
We had Javonte Williams off the board from Denver. Odell Beckham Jr. left the field. DJ Moore, Jerry Jeudy, Chase Claypool all picked. Raheem Mostert now off the board, as was Mike Davis.
Yeah, all right. I didn't want to say it. I figured he'd be gone. I think that's a really good pick. I think he's going to get a lot of play. I think he's a guy that a lot of Bears fans are remembering from his time in Chicago and thinking like, well, the guy got cut because, he wasn't really that good. But he went on and backed up CMC last year and had a great year in Carolina. And there's really nobody that's going to challenge him in Atlanta. So this is an opportunity this is a situation where you have tremendous opportunity on a decent player. And so a lot of times fantasy is all about volume. And that's what you have here.
By the way, Laviska Shenault is an extremely interesting choice. I find that so fun because Laviska is a fun player that does everything. Like the Cordero Patterson that actually kind of hit the role because he was a good enough wide receiver. So it'll be really interesting to see if Urban Meyer's offense can get off the ground. I mean, look, That's the scary thing about preseason, Jeff. I feel like you're probably going to know exactly what I'm talking about. Is that when your offense looks good, you say our offense is going to be good, and when your offense looks like the Bears or the Jags have looked, you say our coach is just calling vanilla stuff. Like obviously it's going to get better. So it's going to depend on whether or not things do look better in Jacksonville. But it's like if Trevor Lawrence in that offense can open a new vein a little bit and start to produce, Chenault's going to be right at the forefront of it, you know?
Yeah, I like Chenault. Shark is maybe rated a little ahead of him in a lot of places, but I would actually rather have Laviscus. So, all right, bring up running backs because I think we're getting close, right?
Right. I've been trying to be chill about it too. Just try to play the poker game.
Oh, that's not how you do fantasy. You get really excited and you get nervous.
I can't help but feel like Michel's a good choice here. Like,
oh, no. Don't do that. Don't
really?
do that.
What? Why?
I don't think we know what he's going to be. He wasn't very much in New England. Read the top 5 for me.
Michel, Fournette, Gordon, Dillon, Ronald Jones. Ronald Jones is a great back. What? Who'd you go with?
I said, oh my God.
We could also shift to wide receiver if you wanted.
Well, it's your draft. But at this point, I think maybe you're trying to get in on an offense. So Trey Sermon is interesting with San Francisco. Mm-hmm. I think that he could be a guy that takes the bulk of the carries.
Quick,
again, I'm just advising you. I'm not making the pick.
Right. I think I'm going to shift over to wide receiver because my head says in a PPR league, especially given that he just got brand new paper, I think Robbie Anderson's going to pick up a lot of catches. And like you're talking about, at this point, we're looking at running backs. Just so you know, like all the running backs from here, I mean, whatever you do think about ESPN's rankings are ranked 94 to 136. Everybody on the page, like 94, 97, 98, 99, 100. So given that we have pick 87, I'm thinking we might be able to find like either a better player, like Zack Moss is on here, Michael Carter's on here. Depends on what you think of Kenyon Drake, for instance. But either way, we're kind of reaching. We're at the stage of reaching for running back support, and we can live with that. We have Lamar Jackson, Nick Chubb, and Keenan Allen. But Robbie Anderson's somebody I feel confident about producing this year, should he be able to stay healthy.
Well, and now I think that you're at the point where you're going to need to take a guy that you think has a specific role, right? Mm-hmm. Because you've got both Tampa Bay running. Tampa Bay is obviously a great offense, right? Well, sure, but how much is Leonard Fournette going to produce? How much is Ronald Jones going to produce? That's a split share there.
Yep.
So if you feel comfortable taking one of those guys and counting on that, you can do that. Zack Moss, is he the lead guy in Buffalo? It's a really good offense. Right. So I like Trey Sermon. I think it's an interesting pick. It's it's a big swing. It's kind of a swinging out of your shoes kind of thing, but it's betting on that offense and betting on his talent to be able to take over that backfield.
And who doesn't want a piece of that backfield, by the way? Oh, we've got another Bear drafted. Round 4, pick 20. Darnell Mooney is off the board. Which, hey, you know what? Especially once the Bears get to the point where they're playing Justin Fields. Like, I'll say it if you won't, JB. I get the impression that if Matt Nagy has a brain in his head, he's going to be calling a very pass-heavy offense. Because I don't know if the offensive line can support more than maybe 40% runs. And even then, I feel like he would just be running for the sake of balance more so than actually running because he wants to run the ball. A lot of RPOs. Mooney's going to be like obviously second on the chain, but if the Bears air the ball out at all and Justin Fields can convert enough first downs to keep like play counts up, because like you said, a lot of it's volume, I do feel like Mooney could find a little niche in fantasy, even if not the biggest one. What do you think?
Sure. It's a little early though. That's all I'll say.
Oh, I would agree, for sure. But I want to back up anybody who is thinking about Mooney. Obviously, maybe don't take them pick 80th, but even so, Mooney could very well end up productive, especially if, for crying out loud, how many yards do you think he left on the table last year just due to missed throws? And be realistic, they weren't all going to get converted, but Derek Carr, how many extra yards does he get?
Another 230.
Yep, and probably 3 touchdowns, I'd say.
Sure.
Which, hey, that's big, especially for a deep threat kind of guy. Fields should be able to hit that. I don't mean to be too homeristic, but that really is Fields' game, is hitting those deep shots.
Absolutely.
You know, when he eventually gets in. Noah Fant off the board, Logan Thomas off the board, Devonta Smith. That's an interesting choice. I mean, Devonta has gotten really nice reps in terms of how he's looked. We are back on the board, by the way. So it is us time. Obviously, this is where I need to take a kicker, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You do you, my man.
All right, so Sony Michel has lasted this long. I think you've got a point here that, like, maybe we wait a little bit. Okay, so you tell me. Pick 87. Would you rather want Goddard or Trey Sermon? Because I'm caught between the two.
So, I mean, Trey Sermon swinging from the heels. I mean, I like a guy like Zack Moss would be interesting. I don't know if he's gone. It's a little, that's maybe a little safer. So at this point, I think you're trying to hit a home run,
right?
And to me, that's what Trey Sermon is. Goddard, I don't really love buying into the Eagles' offense because I don't know that I believe that they're going to be
make your pick
better than a tire fire this year. But I guess that's where I'm at. I would probably go.
I'll take
that direction. So someone in the chat.
I'm sitting here thinking about tight ends just as I look through it. Like, eventually I got to get one, and right now, like you are saying, when we look through this, Robert Tonyan, Dallas Goedert, Gesicki, Jonnu Smith, Tyler Higbee, like we're kind of looking for that guy who's going to squeeze his way into the end zone more than the guy who's going to become a massive foundational part of the offense. So it's just a matter of figuring that out, which good luck. But my head is almost leaning Gesicki, because I do feel like Gesicki, every time I do watch the Dolphins, ends up catching more balls than I expect him to. But who knows? Maybe that changes.
Yeah, I think the New England tight ends are interesting too. I don't know if they're still on the board or not. But
Johnny is.
I think someone in the chat said this is why you wait on quarterbacks. I mean, generally, sure. Like, I can kind of see that philosophy. But there's 20 teams, and the rosters are going to be so thin that if you have an elite quarterback, you're going to be in almost every game. Right. And so I don't know that I necessarily agree with that from a philosophy up front, because you don't know what was going to happen. You don't, when you send it on and you've got, 26 picks until it gets back to you, you don't really know what's going to happen. And there could be a huge run of quarterbacks and all of a sudden you're starting Daniel Jones, which no one wants that.
I do feel like Daniel Jones. Nah, I wanted to sit here and prop him up, but man, there's just a little too much disaster in that fire. Like, I love the whole comparison, calling him White Jameis, because I do feel like Jones. I mean, what was it? He was like got tracked as having one of the fastest running speeds in the NFL, like last year or something like that. Like,
yeah, so that's definitely not Jameis. Jameis isn't fast.
Oh, sure, it's more the whole like boom or bust nature of Jones's play. Like, if you cherry picked his highlights, he looks insane. The trouble is all the fumbles, all the picks, all the stuff that makes Daniel Jones.
Yeah, I don't see it with him.
Yeah, Shane, you played it well, by the way. Just like he waited a whole extra round and got Dak, he says, which I do feel like worked out for him.
Yeah, and I mean, like, it's fine, right? Like, it's a good way to go. I don't have a problem with it. It's just, you don't know. When you've got 20 teams, you have to take some chances, or you have to make some decisions at some point. You could wait and there'd be a run, and again, you're picking way down on the list. It worked out for you, right? So this is more about strategy and process and feeling good about where you're at. You feel good about your results. That's great, right? I mean, so do we, right? I mean, you got Lamar Jackson, and that's good. That's a guy that's almost certainly going to finish top 5 at the position, and gives a really strong base to this team.
Mm-hmm.
But we're going to pay for it in other ways. We're going to have to try to take some chances at other spots,
right,
and hope that we hit somewhere else. And that's why we maybe are, saying, well, I can get a floor level guy here, or I can try to swing for the fences and see if I can get a guy that's going to bust out and he's going to take over and possibly has a chance to finish as a high RB2 or a low end RB1.
That's why we're rolling with Trey Sermon.
Right.
Exactly. Like,
might be a dumb pick.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it might be something that just doesn't work out.
I feel like
in a league like this, I think you gotta swing for the fences.
Yep. Here's a question that I would love to ask an actual fantasy guru, okay? I feel like, similar to tight ends, there is always 2, maybe 3 defenses that distinguish themselves from the pack. Obviously, you had somebody like Tampa Bay last year, and I'd have to stew on it to come up with the other ones. But I know for years there, like I had in 2018, the Bears defense, and they produced like crazy. Like the defense on the right week will win you a game. Why is it so common to get your defense so low? Is it purely because you can play the matchup wheel and kind of get similar-ish production for nothing?
It's incredibly variable year to year. It's tough to really predict the defenses. I think you kind of have an idea that, Baltimore is usually pretty good and they're usually pretty reliable. But even so, I think you're going to find that you cycle through defenses a lot, so you don't necessarily want to invest a high pick in them. And then I think there's just a little bit of that's what is done, right? It's pretty like standard fantasy advice to say, don't take a defense until one of your last picks. And then there'll be somebody that'll take one in the middle rounds, the top defense off the board because they've filled all their starting positions. And so they take they take the Rams D and they feel really excited about that. And, there's always going to be somebody that makes fun of them for that. But
sure,
I don't mind going a little earlier than late. If you want to pick up somebody that you think is,
I just like the fantasy philosophy question more than anything. By the way, Chark just went here in round 5, pick 18, so he ended up lower on the list. It looks like, by the way, talking about Gesicki and Goddard got them drafted. So, standard, right? The streamer curse, if nothing else. Who knows? Maybe they had eyes on them the whole time.
What do you got left for tight ends?
Tight ends, we are looking at Jonnu Smith, Tyler Higbee, Evan Ingram, Austin Hooper, which I did not check in with Cleveland's offense last year. I am a little curious to see why Austin Hooper's so low on a lot of these lists, but maybe there's something I'm missing.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't really do much. That's probably why.
Oh, sure. That's just unusual to me, if nothing else. But yeah. Case, your risky plays are nuts. You're Chad Chads, right? Remind me which team you are, because at some point I do want to start popping around rosters to see who we've got. But outside of Hunter Henry, Jeff, we've got Gronk, Irv Smith, Eric Ebron, who... Let me see Irv Smith real fast. I know I heard a bunch of Vikings fans talking about how this was his year, but let's see. He ended up... I'm seeing that he's doubtful, and I'm trying to figure out what injury. Okay, it's a meniscus injury. Well, that does not sound awesome, especially if that's lingering, but I have no idea what that looks like. Jarvis Landry and Jonnu Smith both off the board, by the way.
Okay.
Along with Michael Pittman.
So Higbee's still there?
Audrey, which team are you? Remind me. And then, yes, Higbee is still there. Audrey, you're jumping first-year fantasy into a 20-team league, so know that we're all riding the lightning. I picked Nick Chubb first round, which...
I'm struggling. Well, that'd be fine if you were picked 15. I'm struggling, and because I've never seen it. I think that if it gets to you and you want to take your tight end, I would feel really good about Higbee. Hooper, you said, was still there or gone?
Hooper's still there, as is, so we've got Higbee and Hooper in a 2-player cloud that if we can get there,
Yeah, I think that's fine.
I don't mind. Oh, Audrey, actually, I'm trying to say that I think Chark is a good idea, especially right there. That's pretty solid value. What would you say, Jeff, about pick 100 for Chark? I think
that's great. I think that the Jacksonville offense is probably underrated. I think they can come in and be pretty good. Lawrence will probably hit the ground running. I think that, we either take one of those guys or you just keep waiting on the position and you take a guy like your boy Blake Jarwin and get into the Dallas offense and hope he spikes a few. Again, I'm just the marginal value of some of these guys.
I'm sitting here thinking about it, Jeff, and I mean, you're right. Like we've still got Zack Moss on the board, which makes a lot of sense to me because the general gist of what we're thinking is that Dabble's not going to like use the running game almost at all. And I would personally agree, like he probably won't, but now we're looking at pick 114. I mean, at some point you need a decent flex, right? And I feel like Zack Moss helps us buoy the Trey Sermon pick, just in case it's not the home run we want it to be, right?
Yeah, the worry about Zack Moss is that, even when you get close to the end zone, that Josh Allen's is such a good red zone runner, a goal line runner, that he's going to take away some of the touchdowns. But, Moss didn't probably produce at the level that people were hoping he would as a rookie. And so I assume that that's probably why he's rated as low as he is. I still like him. I still think you get into that good offense, and I really like getting into good offenses. So to me, that would be a good pick. Michael Carter's still there. It's not a good offense, but
let me see.
That's another swing from the heels pick.
Which one are we looking at? Michael Carter. Running backs. Let me see. Hang on. He may have got drafted.
Okay.
Yes, Michael Carter was drafted. I need to actually figure out which team he was drafted to. Looks like he went to, maybe the chat will tell us, because we are suddenly getting dangerously close to our pick here, and I can't figure out for the life of me how to click on a player and have him show where he went. But
no worries.
I'm sure there's some way to do it. Curtis Samuel is up here as the highest ranked player on the board. Leonard Fournette seems awfully high. I'm curious as to why ESPN has him ranked 97th overall. Like, is it just because he's Leonard Fournette? Because I guess I look at it and feel like Ronald Jones is the better football player. But what do you think? What am I missing?
Yeah, I mean, again, you're into a good offense, but they want to throw the ball. So I struggle a little bit, but I mean, at this point in this setup, that's not a bad idea either.
Mm-hmm.
He's talented. He's just kind of big.
Fournette or Ronald?
Fournette. He scored a lot of touchdowns.
Oh, yeah, he does. He's their goal line back, right?
And that's really what you're looking for right now, right? You're looking for guys that can spike touchdowns.
I'm looking to get it on good offenses is what I'm looking for.
I think that's probably what you have to do with this pick.
Especially coming away from, now granted, Twitter drama can mean nothing. I'm sure you know that just as well as I do. But Leonard Fournette walking away from last year, let's say a little bit antagonistic towards his coaching staff, does have me curious as to what the dynamic's going to be there. Well, it doesn't matter because Leonard Fournette got taken in front of us. I'm going to take Zack Moss and not feel bad about it. How does that make you feel?
That's fine. Now we've got 14 pick or 12 picks until we pick again. Or
oh shoot, Jalen Hurts came off the board. Round 6, pick 10.
Okay.
Okay. I guess you are looking for dual threats, like wherever you can find them, right?
He's ranked pretty high in some places. I'm surprised, but you're getting that running boost. So it's just not something that I feel comfortable with. But
they're also trying to find a quarterback, to be totally fair. And as where we're at now, we've got Shane, I think that makes sense. Sorry, I just totally brain farted. Yeah, it's between like Jalen Hurts or Joe Burrow, Tua Tagovailoa, or some of the rookies. So I can see how trying to reach for that running element, you could land there. It's just going to be a matter of whether he plays, and plays well. To be clear,
right?
Plays the euphemism. All right, now I have an idea that I want to throw at you, Jeff, but I don't want to throw it at you too early. So I want to wait a couple more picks so that we can talk about it. Okay, you know what? What if I talked about it in general, right? What do you think about hostage situations? Intentionally drafting a player that you don't expect to use so that you can try to pull a trade pick, later. Do you think it works, or do you think that it is a fool's errand?
Well, again, this is one of those things where you have to know your league and know if these guys are people that will trade. There are plenty of leagues that I've been in that trades are almost impossible to pull off. Trades seem to be where you have to give 150% value to make a trade happen. And I find those leagues frustrating. So it's, part of it's like, are you going to get away with it, or are you actually going to be able to extract value? But there's sometimes where there's a guy that you think this guy's too valuable, and you have to take him. I can understand the idea of maybe wanting to take a player that you think could hit and be able to trade later. So,
Right.
If you wanted to do that, and I think that you were speaking the same language, I'm not sure you wait a couple rounds. I don't know where we're at on that position, but you might want to think about that earlier.
That's where I'm at, and I'll start saying the name because here, after one pick, we've got an auto draft and then 3 before us. Let's just say that whether it's Justin Fields or Trey Lance, I've got my I've got my eyes on both of them. That by week 8, those should be very strong starters. You know what I mean? Like, especially from a fantasy perspective, if you can pick up end zone points off of Justin Fields or Lance, just because they're the starting quarterback at that time, you could dominate. Because, like, I don't with Lamar Jackson, just to use an example, I'm not going to end up needing them. But somebody who, like, if something does happen to, I don't know, Kyler Murray gets hurt, or like not Lamar, that's me, not going to wish anything negative there, but you get the idea. Having that rookie on the bench could become a big trade piece, you know?
Yes, I think that it's interesting. Now, again, you could absolutely just burn yourself. The only thing that you could hope for is that you already have your bye week fill-in, which may be an issue if people carry 2 quarterbacks and you might not have a quarterback on the board during your week 8 bye with Lamar, right? And you would just take a 0 and you would have to kind of live with that. So you could take the rookie and say, like, well, if nothing else, I've got a backup in case Lamar gets hurt, and I feel good about this guy, coming in and bringing value. Your trade deadline is going to be, week 10 or 12 or something like that, and you could maybe get a good return on that guy. So I don't hate it, and especially since if you think that they're going to pop and be really good, you could definitely do it.
Mike, that's who I had my eye on. Looking at Mike Swing right here, who just drafted Trey Lance. I feel like if you can wait a couple weeks for however long it takes, Trey Lance is going to come in and dominate. So as long as Garoppolo doesn't have an Alex Smith-esque, like, holding off of Kaepernick season, that should be, I think, a very solid selection.
It looks like Trevor Lawrence is still on the board too.
Yep.
I think he's probably going to come in and do pretty well.
I think so.
Yeah,
My head, by
know.
the way, here says Austin Hooper. It's not the grandest choice, but...
So you either fill your tight end role with Hooper or you take Fields.
Right.
And like the guy that you were thinking about.
And you know what? Bears fan league, as much as I desperately want to take Justin Fields, I'm going to throw that to the rest of the room and just... It's open season. Fields is out there, and you're well within reason to pick him right now. So which Bears fan is it going to be that puts JF1 right there on their bench? I think, by the way, Mike, having Lance as insurance for Brady, because you just never know. I mean, Jeff, am I crazy here? Like, eventually the clock has to strike midnight for Brady one of these days, but it might not be this year. It might not be next year. I don't know, but what if it is? Feels like getting an insurance policy for the guy that just won the Super Bowl. Like, isn't a terrible idea, but maybe I'm just being a doomsayer. Talk to me about Brady.
I don't know, man. I was listening to the Athletic Pod a few weeks ago, and they were talking to the Buccaneers writer, and they're like, "Oh, by the way, Brady was hurt last year, and they never disclosed it, and he's full health now, and he looks better." And it's like, okay,
are you kidding me?
So this guy doesn't make any sense, so I'll never bet against Brady again. Not that I have much in my life, but I
completely understand. I remember muttering something like, okay, well, the Bears play the Bucs in like week 9 or something like that, and so maybe that game's easier than we think it is, but people have been saying that age was coming for Brady since he was 37, like a very normal age to be talking about this. That's almost like we're closer to being a decade into talking about Brady's got to eventually retire than we are not, which is bananas. Like,
it's craziest thing.
It's just been forever. By the way, we've finally got our Justin Fields selection, round 7, pick 12, over here with, oh man, I'm going to butcher this. Kailua Oahu Bears in Hawaii, which is rad. So, great selection. I want to pop over and see, let's see, Kailua Oahu. Which, by the way, does that mean, interesting, Fields is benching for Patrick Mahomes there, which is a very strong quarterback room. So that exact hostage situation we talked about, that could very well happen here. Jordan Evans, Jeff says, I thought about picking Fields, but then I thought about Nagy calling plays for him and couldn't do it, which is sad, but it makes sense. I mean, I can't blame him.
That seems about right. I'm a little worried myself.
Talking on that topic, I mean, like, I don't know what it's going to take. Like, frankly, I'm actually a little curious as to why Laser didn't just keep the role, you know? Given everything that's going on. It's not that I'm trying to like, start the doomsday timer or something like that, but you got to think that with how much outrage there has been towards the franchise, obviously they're not going to make fan-related decisions, but the offense clicked along with Laser. It would have been very easy for him to just go, all right, Laser, you're going to do it for now, and I'm going to be a managerial head coach. He chose not to. I'm sure you and EJ have talked about it, and that I just haven't caught up, but that is something that'll be interesting to monitor, because you better believe if the Bears lose like 3 of their first 5 games or something like that, people are going to be wanting that changeover fast, let alone if they lose 2 of their first 3, that may already be being called for, you know?
I think he thinks that that's what he's brought in for. I mean, it's just not the podcast for this, but hey, I just don't know that I believe that he understands how to call a complete offensive scheme. And I know a lot of people say, well, he sucks at everything. He doesn't. He's got some good ideas. He's got some good stuff. The problem is that I don't believe that he understands how to call the run game. You know, he has farmed that out to his assistants before. I think he believes that his job is to draw up passing plays. And if you don't understand how those connect, which is through play action, and how those need to reinforce each other, then I don't think that you can call a modern offense. And that's, I think, the problem with Nagy, is that he thinks that he is just like the passing game coordinator that is now the head coach and play caller. And he doesn't understand how the offense works together. You put it out there, like San Francisco's offense, and EJ was talking about it earlier today too. San Francisco's offense is fascinating to watch. And it's because they know how all of those things work together.
Right.
And I don't have confidence that Nagy does. I think he only picked up the passing part of it.
Mm-hmm. It'll be really interesting to see. Like you said, it's not the podcast, and we'll get back to fantasy stuff here fairly soon, I'm sure. But one thing that is interesting to me, at least this is how I started thinking about it, JB, is sometimes I feel like Nagy calls his offense thinking from the perspective of a defensive coordinator trying to stop him, instead of thinking from the perspective of his offense out, if that makes sense. Like
San Fran galaxy brains everything.
Well, that's the thing, right? It's the whole, I can't do an inside run standard because it's going to get stuffed. So instead I'm going to do a sprint option, and we're going to get the yards there. But we don't see the basic call. We just see the sprint option and go, what were you thinking? And I don't know. I mean, you look at Kyle Shanahan, for instance, Sean McVay, another great example. I don't feel like the beauty of their offense is in their complexity. I actually feel like the beauty is in their simplicity. And that's like the magic at this moment, especially in a day and age where you can't do what you used to in 2000 and just get a billion practice reps to rep out everything. So I don't know. I don't know what'll happen, but I do think that if he didn't silently hand over play calling duties to Laser or learn a thing or two, the calls are going to only get louder from here. So I hope he's going to plan to manage it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think offenses are interesting in the evolution. If you look back, over the history of the entire league, and, there's all these different schools of thought and everything, but really football kind of comes back to some basics. You can add spice in wherever you want, different formations, you can add motion, you can do all these things to try to manipulate the defense. Really what it comes down to is trying to change the math on defense so that you get more blockers blocking for your player, or you get, fewer defenders trying to guard your player. And then you have variations on that. So you have a running play that goes to one side, and then you have a counter to that running play, and then you have a play action off that running play, right? I mean, so it builds off of each other. And I just not sure that I've seen a complete offensive philosophy under Nagy since he's been here.
But yeah, we'll get to that another time, exactly like you said, because I feel like a couple bandy back and forth. That's a nice little nugget drop. You can find Jeff on Bears Over Beers and on the brand new podcast. Oh gosh, it is. I can't believe I forgot the name. What is it?
Are we letting that out?
We might as well just throw in a little droplet here for any viewer watching this.
So Lester Wiltfong Jr. and I are going to have a recap show, and we're going to call it Bare and Balanced.
That's it. It's so good. I love the name so much. We've got a whole bunch of interesting selections, by the way. T.Y. Hilton gone, Naheem Himes gone, Matt Ryan, Devontae Parker, Ryan Fitzpatrick off the board, R8P2, Irv Smith. Eventually he had to get taken, and he very well could be the breakout solution that they want. Dadgummit, somebody took James White. That makes all the sense in the world. Terrence Marshall off the board. So now we are a couple picks away from us. I'm surprised James White made it to R8P6 in a PPR league, but maybe I'm misremembering how much running he actually does. I know they do a ton of committee there.
Yeah, it's again, you're getting to the point where you're looking at pass catching backs, you're looking at third down backs, like a guy like maybe how much do we want to give away, but like McKissick is interesting on Washington because he looks like he probably has a third down role.
Desean Jackson, by the way, just got taken on Los Angeles. I am curious to see what Matt Stafford and Desean Jackson combine for. He's another ageless wonder.
Especially if you think that you're like, okay, I'm going to put this guy in and hope that he just pops for, it has one of those games where he can win me the week because it's a thin league, right?
Right.
Yeah, I'm really curious about what people are thinking about now, because at this point you might as well start taking chances on guys. You might start taking handcuffs for your running backs, or I don't know about wide receiver handcuffs. I don't know that exists, but definitely start thinking about running back handcuffs and start thinking about guys with third down roles, guys that are slot receivers, possession receivers.
I was gonna say, if you had to pick, let's see. I don't want to give away too much. You know what? I would text you, but I'm really going through it as I sit here. There is 3 picks left in front of us. We've got some latency to back us up here. Thinking Tony Pollard and Elijah Moore. Which of those
both
two are you
great.
thinking? I was gonna say
both. Both of those guys are guys that I was going to text you about. Well, I texted you about one of them, and I was going to text you about both of them.
Right. Pollard is that third down back role, exactly like you're talking about. I mean,
and if Zeke gets hurt, he becomes an RB1.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So to me, that's a great pick.
You've got one there.
Alexander Madison is interesting as well.
Who
in terms of running backs?
Oh, I hadn't thought about that at all. You mean purely because Dalvin Cook goes down all the time?
Well, if he misses time, he's an RB1. I mean, he can be, and he's got some.
Elijah Moore's off the board.
Okay.
Oh, good pick. Good pick.
So what do we got left? How many until we go?
We
2?
got one more. NY Knicks in front of us, and I'm curious about Jamison Crowder, like how that's going to work. I do think Crowder's obviously a very good player, but I don't have a lot of faith in the Jets offense. I feel like this is going to sound so reductionist, Jeff, that there are some franchises you just learn to not trust, And
Sure.
I have hit the point where we're taking Pollard, by the way, and moving this along. But I feel like I've hit the point where when it comes to the Jets and when it comes to the Lions, that I just try to place an adjustment, if you will, on them and say they're not going to be what I want them to be. So I just need to account for that. Do you have any of those franchises that you're like, not them?
I mean, I can see where you're coming from with the Jets. I think that there are some offense that I want no part of, and when that happens, I'll just avoid them. I think that people think I'm joking. I haven't drafted a Packer in like 4 years, 5 years.
That's awesome.
I just at some point I was like, you know what? No, because I don't want to cheer for them at all.
Right.
And in fantasy, sometimes you're like, oh, I need
Yeah, you're
23
kind of
points from
looking at like,
Rodgers, and it's like, no, I'm not going to do that to myself anymore. So I pick from a pool of 31 teams, and then there's some times where I say, you know what, I'm not going to take anybody from, like you say, like the Jets last year or something like that.
right.
I'm a little bit at least intrigued by some of the pieces of the Jets this year, but
the Jets are
I can
that
understand
team.
avoiding them.
The Jets are that team that I feel like could easily explode. Like they could be the shocker, but I feel like they are just. I mean, we could simplify it and say like they're a powder keg. Whether they go off or blow up in the coaching staff's face, hard to say from right now. We know nothing. You know what I mean? For all we know, the instant that people start swapping around defensive coverages on Zach Wilson, he melts. We don't really know. It's just going to be a matter of waiting and seeing. I am... The really weird part for me right now, Jeff, is that all these rookie quarterbacks have looked pretty good in the preseason. Like, nobody has made you go, ooh, that's trending in the wrong direction. Not really. So it'll be interesting to follow all 5 of them, because why not? It's fun. And go from there.
A lot of people love this rookie class of quarterbacks. It's nice that the Bears got one for once in a good class.
Yeah, we didn't have to wait for next year to draft Sam Howell.
You never know. They might all be good. I mean, the math is against them. That never happens. But they might all be good. I'm a little bit worried about Wilson because I think his game is mostly off of these like kind of splash throws, and I don't know that he has the consistency to be like a great NFL quarterback. But you never know. And he's very slender. Like he doesn't have a big frame. That would worry me with injuries. So I would worry a little bit about that. I mean, I think Lawrence looks awesome. I think Fields looks awesome. I think Lance looks like super toolsy and a guy that once he gets in there and starts learning stuff, he's in the perfect position.
Such a perfect offense for him.
Those 3 guys I really don't worry about. New England's a really great place for a guy like Mac Jones.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really a good pick by them. Like that was a smart pick because they took a guy that they can use that skill set. Mac Jones can be successful. I don't think he's going to be top of the league, but I think he can be successful.
Sure.
And so to me, Wilson's the only question mark. Not the only question mark. Any of those guys could not work out, but Wilson to me is the guy that I'm like, I don't know. I don't really like the situation. I don't know if enough to not like or like the situation. They hired a defensive head coach who seems awesome. Like Robert Saleh seems like an awesome dude. I don't know if you've listened to the Flying Coach podcast series. So the Ringer podcast network, Flying Coach is Peter Schrager is the host and Sean McVay is the co-host, I guess. And he brought on a bunch of coaches, NFL coaches, and just talked shop all offseason. And they're fascinating. And he brought on Robert Saleh for one of them.
Awesome.
And Saleh just seems like a great guy. Like he seems like a guy that you want to play for. And so I'm rooting for him. Like I hope he does well. I mean, the Jets are not a team that I care one way or the other about.
Right.
But I think that he seems like a good guy, and I hope he does well. So
not to mention, just to throw it out there, I hate to look, this could come across kind of corny because I'm a Chicago fan, right? Like, all I want in Chicago is a great offense, and this whole boom towards offensive head coaches is awesome. That said, it would be really cool to see either Brandon Staley, one of the most innovative defensive minds, or Saleh, or Robert Saleh, like an awesome dude who comes from a defensive background, succeed. And with Justin Herbert and Zach Wilson, one of them very well could. It's just a matter of seeing that sustain itself so that Tomlin and I guess Belichick to that point aren't like the 2 unicorns of the group, you know?
Yeah, it's a really interesting point. And to me, Staley is the guy that I have. So if some people probably know this, probably not most, but obviously I'm a huge Bears fan. My second team's always been the Chargers. And so I was incredibly excited when they hired Staley because he seems like a genius. Like he's just one of those guys. It's just
he seems so smart.
He's super smart.
Like
right?
McVay. I keep
he's
making
kind
the
of the
comparison
defensive
in my mind.
McVay, right? And so it's interesting that those guys got to work together for a year. But he does seem like kind of the defensive McVay, and so I'm very hopeful that he can do that. Now I don't think that Robert Saleh is billed as that, but he's billed as like this great team builder and motivator and a great coach in that traditional sense.
Yeah, not to
And
make
so,
two apples to apples a comparison, but like Ron Rivera, John Fox is kind of what you're thinking. Like a program runner as much as anything else, right?
That's interesting. So I guess who would be a good, because Ron Rivera, yes. I don't know, John Fox, maybe not.
You know, people give Fox a lot of a lot of crap for taking two teams to like right at the precipice of a Super Bowl run. But it obviously didn't.
Players coach, Lovey, right? I mean, Lovey. Players coach. You know, a guy like that. Yeah, that probably makes sense. I was trying to think of an example where, you know, like Bill Walsh would be kind of a cerebral guy.
Sure. And I throw the comparison thing out there just because I like to say this every once in a while after we go down a comparison hole, Jeff, of just like comparisons aren't there because the comparison is perfect. Comparisons are there to help give people like an idea of what you're saying. So me throwing those out there help try to gauge what you mean when you talk about like a great guy you want to play for. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I was just trying to think of if there was a really good historical parallel that we could draw. So I see that you made a pick through that. And
Bateman.
Yes, very excited about Rashad Bateman. Now, that is an interesting stack. That's not necessarily something that we've talked about yet, stacking a wide receiver with your quarterback. But that is what we did there is because we have Lamar, and now we've got the rookie Rashad Bateman, who looks like a guy that can come in and play right away. He's a great route runner. He was my favorite wide receiver in the draft. You know, obviously some of the higher end guys I didn't really look at as much because the Bears weren't going to trade up for a wide receiver, but I thought there was a possibility that maybe they were going to take a wide receiver in the Bateman range. And that was a guy that I really liked. And so he's a guy that I've had my eye on. I think he's an interesting player to see what he can do right away because he's such a good route runner. I think he can get on the field and I think he can produce right away. Oh,
yeah. And another guy I think is going to be really interesting. Interesting being the real word here, right? And we're into the section, by the way, where defenses are getting drafted. Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to be... I've always thought he was going to be good. Hearing that he sounds great coming out of Detroit camp doesn't surprise me. You know what I mean when I say that there are some of those guys that you know that for some reason they're going to get taken in the third round, but you also know that they're going to be really good players. St. Brown always struck me as that guy. But then also I'm really intrigued by Rondell Moore. Mostly because I think Rondell Moore is an electric player, extremely fun film. Maybe some of the funnest film of like last year's draft class, but he is in. I mean, can Arizona's wide receiver room get more loaded? Like,
well, that's what I'm saying.
That's the thing.
A ton of players.
Like, there's just so many mouths to feed, and they've got a $27 million receiver like in the room. He's definitely going to get his fair share of targets, to say the least. Like, they have been throwing resources at wide receiver to the point where, look. Is it a good team building strategy? I can't tell at this point, Jeff. Like, PFF did a study recently talking about how basically to win, especially in the playoffs, you need 3 wide receivers, like 3 really good targets. And the better that, but they also showed that in the regular season, you really just need 2. And then once you get to the playoffs, that third one makes a big difference. I'm going to be very interested to see what happens in Arizona because, like you're saying, it's not like they've got some crazy offensive line or a well-schemed-out running game. It feels like it's just Kyler running around trying to make something happen. He's got a ton of targets to like close his eyes and throw to, but that only gets you so far, you know?
Yeah, I don't really know.
Tariq Cohen is a very interesting choice. He was just taken, by the way, R9, P18. I'm worried about his ACL. Obviously, he's electric, especially in PPR leagues, if he comes back from it. But this has been a very long recovery process, you know?
Always worry about the first year back from an ACL, and he's not fully recovered yet. He's not off the pup, as far as I know.
I don't think so.
He wasn't practicing when I was there a couple weeks ago or whatever that was. And so, it's a gamble. And, if he comes back, they love to give him targets. But you worry about a guy coming back from his first year of an ACL injury, especially a guy that's built on quickness. And so I would worry a little bit about what his explosive nature can be his first year back. I would personally avoid Cohen But again, you're in a league that's so big,
Yeah.
and you need to take chances.
You hit the late part. Cohen's he's an option that, you know what, if you want to stick him on your bench, you may end up rewarded. Another pick that I really love looking at it, because you got like the Broncos D's coming off the board. That's a great choice just from like getting that simple non-variable defense. Some people don't want to play the defense wheel. Totally respect it. But one person got, I think, huge value, Jeff. Round 10, pick 4, Jameis Winston. Based on, obviously we're talking about preseason here, but Jameis was slinging it. And if he integrates with that Sean Payton offense and kind of brings it back online, that's massive value. What do you think?
Number 1 overall pick, right? I mean, it didn't obviously work out in his first stop. He learned last year in the system. They brought him back for a reason. I never really bought the Taysom Hill stuff.
I'm surprised Taysom Hill bought the Taysom Hill stuff. Like, I'm not trying to pick on anybody by any stretch of the imagination, but it is really interesting, his situation as a backup quarterback that actually has gotten real quarterback reps, whereas I thought Sean Payton was kind of just stringing him along.
Yeah. I'm actually kind of curious if Taysom Hill is going to get drafted, because he'd probably have quarterback eligibility in this league, and maybe, you can play him in a bye week or something.
I hadn't thought about that.
It won't surprise me if he gets played.
What is that?
At some point.
Taysom? Let's see. Yeah, there he is. He's ranked just above Mac Jones as the 301st player.
There you go. Yeah, not a guy that I'm necessarily interested in taking now. But that's not. I would never take him. But I would say,
right.
What
about Andy Dalton, number 316? Namesake of the team so far.
Not quite what I would do. So,
I'm sorry. Are you not a believer in handy dandy Andy?
I like Andy. I think he was the right play last year for the Bears offseason, that they should have waited out, and he would have been the best option of the available players. But they decided to go and acquire Nick Foles and give up capital and give him guaranteed money, and it's something that I think I was the most upset of anybody. So what are you thinking about? We're coming up on picks here and 5 picks. You're starting to look at defenses, looks like, or are you starting to think that you're going to...
I'm actually looking at all positions. It's bumping defenses up.
Okay.
If there's a defense, I think people aren't recognizing how good they're going to be this year. It's not the Rams. It's not the Vikings. It's not a kicker. Obviously, now that we're talking about fantasy, I'm trying to string it out a little bit because I know who I want in terms of like... The more that I've played fantasy, Jeff, the more that I feel like kicker is truly just variable. Like, yeah, you want a kicker that's on a decent offense, but at the end of the day, you have no idea when that really good offense, say the Chiefs, is going to suddenly just convert all 5 of their touchdown attempts and leave you with 5 points. So I feel like waiting on a kicker makes a lot of sense. Let's start there. Agree or disagree?
I eliminated kickers in any league that I ran. So I loathe the idea of kickers.
Really?
Yeah, I think it's ridiculous. Actually.
Talk through that.
It's an element of randomness in a game where you're trying to reward creating strong rosters, right? So you could say like it's all kind of random, but I don't know about that. The kicker position is, like you said, you could be a really great kicker, but your offense could do nothing. Your offense could score 5 touchdowns and you get 5 extra points, or they decide to go for 2 and then they miss it and then they go for 2 the next time, so that they make up for the first time. And like your kicker has 2 points, even though the team he's on scored 41 or something, right? And so to me, it's just such an element of randomness, and I hate it the other way too. Like I hate when a kicker gets like 23 points because he kicked a bunch of field goals because he's on a team that couldn't convert into touchdowns. Like I find it to be a random scoring element, and I don't think that's really the spirit of what you're trying to build on fantasy football. So I just eliminate them.
Makes sense.
For me, I don't worry about the kickers until late.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. We are so close to the pick that I desperately want to make. We will see if we get there. Oh man. As far as kickers go, I do feel like you can kind of get a sense for it. The way I've started doing this recently, Jeff, is I used to run Matt Prater for, years. Like, I would take Prater because I loved Matt Stafford. I hated the Lions, fade the Lions every time, and therefore knew Prater was going to get a bunch of kicking opportunities. He often did. And don't get me wrong, you get those weeks where your guy's going to go get 5 points because you're dead on. It's just randomness. But now we are finally drafting. What do you think about the Browns defense? That defense seems to me like they're going to steamroll some people, especially given that they have a dynamic running attack across from them that should keep scores relatively low by second down time. I feel like the addition of John Johnson, the addition of a whole bunch of the defensive backs that they had, the Browns are the choice. What do you think?
Love the Browns defense. I'll just say that they start off with the Chiefs, so you got to eat it in the first week. But otherwise, I think that the Browns defense is probably going to be pretty good. Browns are going to be fun in general. I think they win the North.
I agree. I'm running to the restroom real fast. Buy some time. Talk fantasy. Be right back.
Well, I'd be curious if anybody in the chat has any questions. I haven't kept that up in on it here, but I would say in general, this is fun to run a giant draft like this, to go 20 rounds or 20 teams, 15 rounds. Hope we're not going 20 rounds. But in general, I think that the ideal size is probably a 12-team league. 14 teams can feel a little big. I think 10 teams can be a lot of fun because your rosters are usually pretty stacked. And so that's just kind of a fun element to play fantasy where you have everybody has a great team. But in that case, I would put in more positions. I would add a second quarterback. A 10-team league with 2 quarterback where you have to start 2 quarterbacks is really fun. You could add a super flex, which most people are going to use as a quarterback. That to me makes a pretty fun fantasy experience. In general, over the years, since I've been doing this a long time, I guess, probably been playing fantasy somewhere in like the 20-year range at this point. I kind of came to the point where most of the time I start just picking players I like. And I like a lot of players, but I hated picking players that I had no feelings for or that I really disliked on the field, and that's why I don't pick Packers. But if I don't like a player, I don't really like Ezekiel Elliott as a player. And so if we were sitting there at 7 and that was like the obvious choice, it's not my team. So and Robert lives in Dallas, so I could say, sure, take Ezekiel Elliott, but I don't like him. I don't like him as a player. I just really wasn't impressed with him when they were on the all or nothing. And I just don't really have an interest in owning Ezekiel Elliott on any of my teams. And so for me, I just don't take him. I just take somebody else. Even if he is on the rankings as the best player available, I would prefer to take a guy that I like. I would prefer to take a guy like Austin Eckler, who is a guy that I think is just really fun to watch, and I like rooting for him and cheering for him. So you kind of just apply that to your league, and you're just going to have players that you like, you enjoy, and that makes you kind of enjoy the whole fantasy experience a little bit more. So that's kind of my overall advice. To have more fun in fantasy. The more that you understand the league setup, the more that you understand how to navigate drafts to try to put together a good team, you'll do better overall. But for me, I would rather win with players that I like than with what the sheet told me was the next best player.
I can't help but I jumped in, heard you talk about Ezekiel Elliott. Can't help but agree. I am worried about him. If that makes sense. Like, in terms of not just like, do I think personally, I almost get the impression that the Cowboys and Zeke are at odds to some degree. Like, I can't, or almost as if, and again, this is the outside looking in, but I live in Dallas, as if Dak and Zeke know that they're basically that this town ain't big enough for the two of them, if that makes sense. One of them's the star. Who is it? Because Zeke thinks it's him, but Dak thinks, obviously, I'm the quarterback. It's me. So I like our choice of Pollard. Something tells me he'll be the guy getting the ball by the end of the year, but it's just a gut feel. It could easily be wrong. I mean, Ezekiel Elliott should have a stronger year than he did last year at the very least. But you never know. Running backs' careers end in the blink of an eye. We had somebody in chat, completely pivoting on you, Jeff, talk about an IDP league. I don't even know what that is. Do you know what an IDP league is?
Yep, individual defensive players. So this is where you would take Roquan Smith instead of Bears defense, right? I don't have a ton of experience in it. I think it's fun, and it adds a very different element. I do think it's hard to know where to take those guys versus offensive players, and so that generally kind of makes it interesting. But I think anything that kind of adds a new element, a new spin on things, gets you to know more of the league than just the wide receivers and running backs is a good thing. And so I'm into it. It's just that's usually a level of complexity that a lot of people don't like. There's not a ton of resources that rank individual defensive players, and so people don't necessarily like that. But I think it's fun. And Roquan's a great pick in that. If you have that, take Roquan because he's going to soak up a lot of tackles and passes defense and stuff like that.
All right, so I'm on the clock again, and right now I just want to pick a kicker and be done with it. So that I don't have to think about the bit. Okay, then.
Take another. Who's wide receiver? Who's running
Let's
back?
go to flex. We got like Darian Evans, Darrell Williams, Quadre Allison, Justin Jackson, Ty Johnson, Marlon Mack. What is his role at this point? Does he have one? Like, Boston Scott is not going to be super high ranking in Philly. Let's see here. Honestly, let's see.
What about Van Jefferson at the Rams? Is he gone? I think that's a good deep pick. Okay.
Nope, he's not.
Quick, make your pick.
I'll take him.
Van Jefferson. And that is more about a guy in a great offense. And if he breaks into a role, then
it's just
you
the
might
feed
have
the beast
somebody...
thing, right?
Yep. I mean, yeah, there's only so many footballs to go around in an offense, but if he's able to establish himself in a role in an elite offense, then you can have a valuable piece. That's all that is. Just try to get into Buccaneers, Rams. Think about the Chiefs. Think about the great offenses in the league. That's where I'm at this point. I think you're just trying to stack talent. I mean, you already took your defense early. How many rounds do you have left?
We are in round 11 of 16 without a pick. We've already made ours. I do think that whether it's me or somebody else, this is very, very, very solid Hunter Renfrow territory. Like, I think, I like Hunter Renfrow, and maybe most importantly, so does Derek Carr. And we'll have to see what happens, because obviously this is still a top-heavy league, and Renfrow would have to crack your lineup. Like, that's the tough thing that we're really looking at, Jeff, is Rashad Bateman or Van Jefferson going to actually outproduce Keenan Allen? Probably not. Are they going to outproduce Robbie Anderson? Probably not. If there's something I like about this format, it's that those first picks actually carry a lot more weight than I've seen a lot of other drafts, like in 8-team leagues where you can basically just build a whole team off the waiver wire. But it'll be really interesting to see what happens from here and whether or not, like, the players that... Because you're right. You know what? As I talk about it, I'm talking myself out of a guy like Renfrow because I feel like there's a decent chance that really all you're looking for here is that guy that's going to explode out of nowhere, right?
Yep.
So
yeah, and I want to just push back a little bit because you have bye weeks to navigate through, right? So you always have that. You have the flex position, and so will you ever start? A guy that you drafted as your wide receiver 3 or 4 over your wide receiver 1? Well, probably not, but those guys might get hurt, right? I mean, hopefully Keenan Allen doesn't get hurt. That would hurt my feelings quite a bit. But I think that, at some point you are, like you were talking about, stacking talent at quarterback, right? Like taking a backup quarterback that you think will be a good trade piece. If you take players down at this range and they emerge as valuable pieces and you feel like, well, I'm still not going to play him above Keenan Allen, I'm still not going to play him above Robbie Anderson, then you can probably trade that player away for a running back too, right? Like, I mean, that's what you want to do. You want to take the best players, obviously, and you just want to keep stacking talent and hope. I always call it buying lottery tickets, right? Buy a bunch of lottery tickets late. If one of them hits, then you'll probably play them, and that'll be great.
Right.
If not, there's still trade chips.
Case, by the way, I love the Cairo Santos choice. We've got Robbie Gould, another former Bear. Younghoe Koo, I feel like, is an intriguing kicker option. Look, Jeff, you just talked about how you don't like kickers. I'm perfectly fine talking about it. I love the weirdness of trying to game plan around which offenses are going to get to the 30 and stop, if that makes sense. Because, for instance, The Rams are probably going to be able to move between the 20s extremely easily. They're probably even going to be able to get the ball into the end zone. The Raiders kicker and the Atlanta kicker then becomes a really nice option because you trust Matt Ryan to be able to get the ball to the red zone, but maybe you don't trust that offense quite enough to score it. Does that make sense?
I mean, I don't know. I think you probably want the kickers associated with the good offenses first and foremost, right?
Sure.
And then like guys with like great talent, especially if you give like 5 points for a field goal over 50 yards,
right?
You know, that kind of stuff. So that's why you'll always see, you know, the Broncos kicker usually gets drafted, even if it changes over the years because they kick in high elevation, and so they generally have longer field goals. You know, Tucker is obviously always the first kicker off the board because he's a great kicker.
He's a very good kicker,
and he gets a lot of opportunity. And so, I don't know. I think it's a wasted kick. I think it's a wasted pick if you take a
wasted
kick last round. A wasted kick, yeah. But if you feel like you need to take a kicker to get it over with, then do that. But again, it's your draft. Like you feel comfortable with what
I think the talent stacking concept is a very strong one. It's hard to ignore, you know? Like, for instance, oh man, what is the layout in Philadelphia in terms of receiving room? Because I'm staring at Boston Scott, and I remember hearing his name quite a bit last year, but it's not like I think he's some kind of insane, like, wide receiver. So
he's a running back, so that would be why.
Even more so. Yep, that would do it, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, Boston Scott's kind of that third down back who, you know, had some opportunity last year, you know, to start a couple games late, and that's probably why you remember him, because he became like one of those waiver wire pickups. You know, he's got some talent, but does he have really an opportunity to get a lot of carries,
right,
or a lot of targets on his own, or does it have to be an injury to open up his opportunities?
Speaking of fantasy, getting this deep in the draft, it is a real experience. Just suddenly starting to look through and be like, oh man, I forgot Sam Perine existed. Like, not specifically to come after Perine. I just remember him being the hot running back out of OU and is on the Bengals roster. Good for him. Just always interesting seeing that kind of thing.
Yeah. Again, you're in places that
you don't delve this deep into the hole, do you?
Considered is something that you want to do. I'm trying to think if there's anybody that's like
Anthony Miller's rated 233.
Boy, yeah, there's an offense I don't think you want any piece of.
I don't think I want any piece of that. Hey, you know what? It could get better in a hurry with Tua than not a quarterback, but that's not saying much. So, especially because one thing I do feel like is easy to forget is that after the 49ers, who at the time were starting Beathard, right, traded for Garoppolo, they still had to sit Garoppolo for like 7 weeks so that he had any idea what he was doing. Like, offense is complicated. So, it's not as if even a switch this late in the game would mean that, like, either Watson or, like, Tua would be up to speed. Though, truth be told, I have absolutely no idea what the league's going to do with Watson, and
I wouldn't count on him playing this year.
Yeah, I wouldn't either. I would not be looking at Watson as, oh man, I should definitely plan around that, to say the least. What do you
sending you a text?
I think it's hilarious because suddenly I'm looking at this like, have you thought about Kadarius Toney and his fantasy value? What about KJ Hamler? Like, the wide receiver 3, who is really talented. Like, dead gum. Like, KJ Hamler's a great third wide receiving option. One guy that just got drafted that I do think is in a 20-team league specifically, like, Jimmy Graham makes a lot of sense. Just because, what do you think? Chances are he's going to score somewhere on the order of 6 to 10 touchdowns. It sounds ridiculous, but like,
I'm not going to score 10. But yeah, he's a one-trick pony. He's got one trick left, and it's inside the red zone. You know, any other route that he runs between the 20s, I think is wasted effort at this point. He just doesn't have it, but he can box people out. He can still go up and, you know, get the jump ball. You know, I think they're overpaying for that one trick, but it is what it is. You know, I wouldn't.
Yeah, that's something that I would absolutely say, by the way, just like as we go through like the Bears, it's funny you talk about, like, I just don't know how many touchdowns the Bears are going to score, you know? But you're right. With Darnell Mooney, Allen Robinson's touchdowns are probably going to come up from where they were last year because if memory serves, he didn't catch many. So with Mooney in the roster, and I'm not necessarily going to look at Bird and Goodwin as if they're going to soak up a bunch of catches, but Kmet's going to get his. There's just not enough touchdowns that are going to go around, like especially passing touchdowns. I don't know about you, JB, but if Fields came in and in 13, 14 games threw 25 touchdowns, that's insane. Like, just as a Bears rookie, I would take that in a heartbeat. And
Sure.
Jimmy Graham is not catching 10 if that happens. Like, Jimmy Graham might catch 10 if there was 40 touchdowns, and that's a massive maybe. Even then, he'd have to overperform. But if Justin Fields throws 40 touchdowns, fantasy value is going to be the least of our thinking, you know?
I think Jimmy Graham is a guy that probably benefits more from Andy Dalton playing longer because Dalton has always used his tight ends pretty well. I think that Justin Fields is a guy that is going to push the ball down the field.
To Jesper Horsted.
So maybe he
I'm
gets
kidding.
to play. But I
No
could
way.
see Darnell Mooney benefiting more. I could see Allen Robinson benefiting more. I could see Marquise Goodwin actually being legitimate and having a role because Fields can actually push the ball down the field. And so I think once that transition's made, I actually think that it's more likely that you would see more wide receivers get the touchdowns.
So I completely agree with you. Outside of, and by the way, we're drafting Donovan Peoples-Jones. I liked that choice with Cleveland. Feel free to talk about that if you'd like. But I don't know if it's a real option or just...
I just saw, I mean, again, I think it's going to be a good offense. I've heard some stuff that says, don't be surprised if he kind of takes over because he is like rising up in the thoughts of the offensive staff there. Now, maybe that's bad intel, but I've heard enough ground swelling to say like this guy's going to start soaking up a lot of targets. And if OBJ isn't the guy that, you know, we all hope that OBJ can be, because I think good players playing at a high level is good for the league, you know, whatever you might think of him. I hope he gets back to being a good player. But if he's not, you know, Jarvis Landry is getting a little older, right? And so that they want those younger guys to kind of step in and take more of those targets. And I've just been hearing some really good things about him coming out of their practices, out of their camp. So I sent you a text about that thinking, let's take a shot.
Why not?
And this is where you're at, is hopefully you can just take a shot and something sticks.
Exactly. And I mean, hey, we are at the point where we are basically going to pick what I would like. I don't know what you tend to like to do, but at this point in the draft, JB, we are probably going to take one more player, whoever it is, and then the 15th pick will be the kicker. And I always like to just pick somebody funny for the last one. Like, just find somebody, because that's like the Mr. Irrelevant guy. And we are in a 20-team league, so Mr. Irrelevant takes on a whole new meaning. Like, that's where you pull out. It always used to be Mitch because he was the Bears quarterback. And at the time, I mean, we went through a long stretch there, Jeff, where drafting the Bears quarterback was funny, like just on its own. So neat that we're not there anymore, assuming Justin Fields is who we're all talking about. But yeah, if there was going to be somebody from, like, whether it's a relic of a lost time that happens to still be in the league or somebody like that, like a goofy choice, do you have one that comes to mind where you're like, I'd take that guy? Or nah, not really?
I don't know, like Kyle Juszczyk.
Oh, man, Juice. That's exactly the kind of stuff where it's like, you're probably not going to use him, but it's fun to have him on the roster, even if just for a little bit.
Yeah. Cordell Patterson.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah, that's a good choice.
What does the running back look like? Do we have
Running backs?
any desire? And here's another thing, being that running backs are pretty thin at this point. I mean, I'm not sure there's anybody that's worth taking. But go ahead and take me through what
We've got Justin Jackson. Justin Jackson's is now gone.
I was gonna say I was gonna say if he's still there, take Justin Jackson, but that's fine. If he's gone.
Well, I mean, we're at the point, JB, where Alan Lazard just got drafted. So
yeah, sure.
we are down there. It's wild to see Sammy Watkins this far down a fantasy draft, by the way, just given his profile in Buffalo so long ago, let alone his the imprint that he did make on the Super Bowl. But that's more one of those, like, history guys that you look at and you're like, huh, really interesting that he's not higher up. But I mean, I wouldn't blame anybody for like being a little slower on the Watkins draw this year, just given the way that his career's gone over the last 3-4 years.
Yep, absolutely. Are you read those running backs?
Xavier Jones, Wayne Gallman, Cordero Patterson, Samja Perrine, Alex Collins, who I was thinking about a little while there, but it sounds like he's getting outdueled by Rashad Perriman. And I'm sitting here thinking we've got a Khalil Herbert choice. We've got some kickers. Xavier Jones went off the board. My head says Gallman, if only because if somebody gets hurt on the San Fran offense, that's an offense you want to be a part of. But we also already have Trey Sermon. What do you think?
Right, so you're just kind of handcuffing that. And that's fine. I was going to say, any thoughts on carrying a second quarterback?
Oh, actually, I was stewing on it. The question is which one. Like, at this point, maybe we go Teddy Bridgewater for if the offense just starts ripping people open, or even just on a good week. If something happens, Bridgewater at least offers you the potential, like, 10-yard run here or there, and you never know whether he'll just run one in himself. But that's one of those where you're just buying into the stacked roster that is Denver more than Bridgewater specifically, certainly.
I would say just make sure they don't have the same bye week as
he
Jackson.
Does not. Thank goodness.
So who else is out there?
My little brother just texted me Samaj Perrine, like Pirine. That's it.
It's Pirine.
Right.
Yeah.
You're right, Michael. But just wanted to let you know. Let's see. He's up right now. I actually want to see how his roster looks like. We might as well just start flicking through some rosters here to brag on the people that, like, I'll read you I'm going to make this pick right now. We're going to go with, and Michael took Teddy Bridgewater. Of course he did. Why wouldn't he? Well, our options.
What other quarterbacks you have?
Our options aren't great, like that we have available to us. Jared Goff, Carson Wentz, Sam Darnold, Cam Newton, Tyrod Taylor, Taysom Hill, Mac Jones, Jimmy Garoppolo. We are really in it at this point. But
I'd say the only player that you would take would be Wentz, just because maybe he gets it figured out.
Maybe. Yeah. Oh,
he's got a ceiling that's above anybody else there.
I can't take Darnold, you know?
No.
I might as well have a second quarterback. It doesn't hurt
make
nobody.
your pick.
Let's start going through and roster bragging. So we'll start up at the top with Mitch Trubisky, who I don't actually know who's running a lot of these because they're going to start to sound pretty similar. But I'll read you the roster, and then you tell me what you like and where you might be a little nervous, right? Kyler Murray, Christian McCaffrey, Kareem Hunt, Darnell Mooney. Oh, my word. Is it? Yeah, Deebo Samuel, Cole Kmet. This Jay Connor is James Conner, Cardinals DST, Kyle Fairbairn, and then Emmanuel Sanders, Kirk Cousins, Christian Kirk, and Khalil Herbert. First thing I notice, tons of Cardinals. That is a lot of Cardinals. But outside of that, what do you think?
Yeah, they're really buying into the Cliff Kingsbury offense, right? I think that sounded pretty good for as big of a league as this is. I think I can kind of get behind that. I mean, I don't know what Connor's going to do, but that's the RB2 there. Obviously, with the number one pick, you get McCaffrey, so that's a positive. I mean, McCaffrey and Murray are going to win you weeks. Mm-hmm. Like that's what that team is. And if wide receivers are a little weak, but
if something happens to Chubb, Kareem Hunt's a good one to have.
Yeah, I mean, Hunt's going to produce on his own. That's the rare case where the second running back is still a viable piece. So those top three picks are strong. I think that guy probably went a little high on Mooney, but I mean, Mooney's it's a Bears league,
fun to have.
And if you want him, you're gonna have to do it. And honestly, if he got Debo after Mooney, which he did, I think, then that those two are probably flipped in a lot of leagues. But 20 teams. Yeah, I mean, I think that's all right.
Cool. Next up, we've got Chicago Fields, who has drafted Joe Burrow, Dalvin Cook, Kenyon Drake, Adam Thielen, Robert Woods, Logan Thomas, Jamar Chase, Vikings DST, Brandon McManus, who is Alexander Madison. Then we've got Malcolm Brown, Justin Jackson, and it's got to be Xavier. Yeah, Xavier Jones. Thoughts?
Yeah, it's pretty smart. Handcuffed Cook with Madison, so that's good. In case Cook goes down, you got
and
the
handcuffed in that you mean like insurance policy, like handcuffed to each other.
Yeah, the handcuff is like the guy doesn't necessarily provide value on his own, but he would be the direct replacement to the guy that you are counting on to be a big player on your team.
Makes sense.
So that's what that means. And it looks like he went with a lot of interesting running backs that if a player ahead of them got injured, that they would take over directly. So that's a pretty good route to take in a league like this, because eventually those guys become hot waiver wire ads.
Yep.
You don't know if any of those guys will actually work out. I mean, I don't know what Justin Jackson's role is in week 1 with a healthy Austin Eckler, but Eckler, has been hurt in the past. So
right.
Jackson might have a role at some point, and that's a really good pick. That's why, I was like, shoot, is he still out there?
Right.
Trying to get him on your team. But
no, I mean, that makes tons of sense. It's basically taking lottery tickets to say which like hot waiver wire ad can I just hang on to for this whole season? Can I just have?
Right.
Yeah, like he's already on my team.
Right.
Makes sense.
Yep. Yeah, it's a good team build. I would say that that's a strong. I mean, Burrow's probably going to throw the ball around a lot. We didn't get to talk about Cincinnati's offense, and I would love to have a piece of the Cincinnati offense.
I am worried about the Cincinnati offense.
I'm worried about the Cincinnati defense, but the Cincinnati offense, I think they play fast. They get a lot of volume. I mean, for fantasy purposes, you got to take it out. You got to take it in that context.
Like not necessarily enough to win, but enough to.
I don't think they're going to win a lot of games. They don't have enough talent on defense, but Burrow's really. I'm really impressed with Joe Burrow. I mean, Justin Herbert. I love Justin Herbert. He deserved to win Rookie of the Year, but if Burrow hadn't gone down, I think it would have been at least interesting. I think Herbert still would have won.
Right.
But Burrow looks the part to me. And they have provided him with some very interesting weapons to build with. Obviously, you've got Chase, but I think T. Higgins is going to lead that pack. And I think he's going to be a fascinating wide receiver in fantasy this year. I think Higgins is the guy to own. And then you still got Tyler Boyd, who has a history of production in that offense. And so I think that they could support 3 fantasy relevant wide receivers this year. And so Burrow, to me, is really interesting. He's a guy that I wouldn't mind having. Now, he's not going to add a lot with his legs. So he's never going to be elite, but just a guy with his arm. I think he's a really solid quarterback in a 20-team league. He's going to be probably QB 10, QB 12, something like that. That's pretty good.
It's really not so bad at all. Hunter Renfrow getting selected. I appreciate it. Thank you. We'll move on to our third team because I'm dying to know. Let's see if we can't get through all 20. Why not? By the end of the draft, we got time. We got Josh Allen, Josh Jacobs, AJ Dillon, Cooper Kupp, Juju Smith-Schuster. That was bungled. Noah Fant, Cole Beasley, Ravens DSTs, Jason Myers, Ben Roethlisberger, Zach Ertz, Alan Lazard, Cordero Patterson. Depending on what happens with Dillon and the rest of this roster, this feels like it could be really strong. I love the Cooper Kupp choice. Josh Allen, like you said, might literally win games on his own. But outside of that, what do you think?
So, I love Josh Allen. When you started off the draft with, that was the first round draft pick, right?
Yep.
That happened.
Third pick of the draft.
Right. And so, I mean, he has to win MVP for that pick to be the right pick. Right.
Right.
Like that's basically what that picking him that high meant. And I think that you probably had that same thought that we had, is like, if there's a run on quarterbacks, then because you have no idea. So it's a totally defensible thing. I'm not sure the rest of the roster is strong enough. So I would be a little worried. I don't love Jacobs as a running back. I don't love Dillon.
Oh, really?
I don't.
Dylan makes sense to me because I'm with you. RB2s, especially with somebody as flexible as Aaron Jones, would worry me. But as far as Josh Jacobs goes, I do feel like at least he gets the volume, like the raw volume to just go for it, you know?
He has volume. Yep, absolutely. He's just not my favorite player. I don't like that offense that much. You are a much bigger Derek Carr fan than I am. So
that's more than fair. Carr's got plenty of tools. He's got, what if I said, like, he's got plenty of production in terms of, you know what? I think I have an easier and more simple way to say it, Jeff. I have slowly learned that what I will call a good quarterback is a pretty low bar. Like, I really want you to just look like you belong in the NFL. And I've had to start trying to elevate my own thinking on what I will call a really good quarterback, if that makes sense. Like,
Sure.
the guys that are top 12. Like, try to limit it to there, because I'll tell you that blank is a good quarterback as long as they belong in, like, the top 22, because I feel like that's hard enough to find, and as a Bears fan, I've had to live that. So people that say Derek Carr is terrible have always sort of grinded my gears, because he's obviously not terrible. But also, do I think that Derek Carr is going to be the reason you win a Super Bowl? Probably not. You know what I mean? Like, probably not. If he was on a loaded roster, like, say that Derek Carr got just, like, snap traded to San Francisco, would he be a favorite? Sure, right? But that doesn't necessarily, like, sometimes that's not enough. And that can create this weird culture like we exist in right now, where there are plenty of teams that look to jettison a perfectly good quarterback that isn't going to be great, but I don't know what's going to happen with that as the league continues.
I think that there's a list that came out a few years ago, and I liked how they put it. They drew a line through the quarterback rankings, and they said, above this line, you can win with the right pieces. Below this line, like, that you can't. You'd have to win despite of them. And then they'd find this quarterback who was kind of that pivot point. And for a couple of years, it was actually Andy Dalton.
Yeah.
When Dalton was playing pretty well, he was kind of that pivot point. And Dalton's game has probably gone down, since then. He's not above that line. I think Carr is probably at that line. Like, maybe you can argue he's one or two players above that line. Maybe you can argue he's one or two players below that line. Maybe you can argue he is the line. But that is where he lives. He's around that line. He's not terrible, but he's not good. He's not a good quarterback. He's not someone that will win you enough games to take you to the mountaintop. But the right pieces have to be around him. I don't believe the right pieces are around Derek Carr. So anyway, I don't love Josh Jacobs, but that doesn't mean that it's a terrible pick. It's personal preference and a guy that I would avoid. Who's the next team?
Let's do it.
Because we'll never get through them all. Even
right.
As fast
Next
as
up
this
is
goes.
Better Have My Mooney with Tom Brady, Alvin Kamara, Phillip Lindsay, Amari Cooper, Devonta Smith. Then this is Mark Andrews, Randall Cobb, Packers DST, kicker yet to be selected, Trey Lance, and then let's see. Oh my gosh. Ramondre Stevenson, whose name I have never heard of till now. Good one to know. Sterling Shepard, John Brown, and then Kenneth Gainwell.
Gainwell is such a great name for a running back. Great name for a running back. I'd say the starting roster sounds pretty solid. I mean, it makes sense as a team build to me. I love Kamara. Kamara's one of my favorite players in the league. Lindsay, I don't know. I'd want to avoid that offense, but again, RB2 in this big of a league, I think you're going to find a lot of these where I'm going to be like, I don't know. Andrews is a solid tight end, so I mean, it's a pretty even team build.
Mm-hmm. Nice job, Mooney. You pulled out a pretty even team build. Hey, it's great. Then let's move on to my brother's team, who has drafted.
I'm going to drag him.
Oh, do it. Zach Wilson, James Robinson, Gus Edwards, Cortland Sutton, Will Fuller, Travis Kelce, Jamal Williams, Colts DST. And then we've got Jacoby Myers, Brian Edwards, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sammy Watkins, and Teddy Bridgewater.
Who the heck did he take with his first couple of picks?
I'd have to look back. Oh, he took Kelsey specifically, and
Kelsey
then
with the first pick. Okay, yeah.
I think he worked towards Robinson after that, especially given what happened with Etienne and Etienne. Thank you. And then I'd have to actually go back and look at the draft history, but it definitely the first couple.
He took Gus the Bus, like, that early in like the third or something.
Might have. I wish there was a way to.
That's the problem with taking Kelsey, taking a tight end that high, is that your next best player is.
What if we said it this way? Because honestly, this is how I see it. Just reading through this roster. First of all, you need James Robinson to produce, but like what I see is this is surprisingly similar to me to the Josh Allen choice, right? You need Kelsey to come through for you every week. Like in a league this deep, you need Kelsey to be the difference, and so it's just a matter of whether he will be. Make sense?
He's your wide receiver one. I guess maybe Sutton was his third rounder. Oh,
and the Gus choice comes from Dobbins having torn his ACL.
Oh no, I know that's what that's from. Dobbins obviously is out for the year. Gus the Bus has a great nickname, so that is like I think 5 bonus points every week. I'm not sure how the league's set up, but. Relying on Wilson, like we talked about that before, it's not something that I would feel very good about. So I would be a little worried about that. Could see him playing Bridgewater more than he thinks he will.
But I personally think that Broncos offense could be so productive that you may not have a problem playing Bridgewater when it's all said and done. But
Fuller is interesting because he's such a boom bust guy. He's in a new offense, but how much, does he have the right quarterback to take advantage of that? Fuller is such a good wide receiver for Watson because Watson could throw the ball deep. Do you feel like Tua can throw the ball deep? I just don't. I don't feel good about Fuller. I think he's a good player, but I think that he needs the right quarterback to unlock him. And I don't think Tua is that guy. I don't like this draft. That's all I'll say.
Is that you just dragging him, or is that just your opinion?
Actually, I don't love the draft, but yes, I'm going out of my way because it's your brother.
Well, thanks. He texted me many text messages as you went through it. Next up, speaking of Tua, we've got Tua Tagovailoa, we've got Derrick Henry, Chris Carson, CeeDee Lamb, Deontay Johnson. I'm hovering over all these just in case. Tyler Higbee, Michael Gallup, Steelers DST, Graham Gano. Then we've got Tyson Williams, Latavius Murray, Ty Johnson, Wayne Gallman, and Alex Collins. I
like it. Who was the quarterback?
Is this Lilichban Kuhn? The quarterback was Tua Tagovailoa.
Yeah, okay. I love the skill positions. That's a great draft of skill positions. Does he have a backup quarterback?
I actually don't think he does. So it's Tua.
All right, so that's the team hinges on Tua. If Tua can take that step, and I think he could. I don't think he's a deep thrower. Maybe I'm wrong. But I think that he can be a good in the intermediate game. But I really like the running backs and the wide receivers. I would feel really good about that. Even Tyler Higbee, I think that's a good pick. That's like getting into a good offense. I think he did well there. Gallup is your flex. I know he's number 3 in that Dallas offense, but we think the Dallas offense will probably be pretty explosive. Plus, they're going to have to throw a lot because that Dallas defense is terrible. You doubled up with CD. I like CD obviously a lot more. Maybe you could trade Gallup for somebody to get into a different offense and not stack 2 wide receivers in the same offense. But that's just kind of a minor gripe. But good running backs, strong running backs. I think this team will be pretty competitive.
I feel like Henry is just too good a choice not to talk about. I mean, obviously, very early, right? That must have been pick number 6, I think it was. But even so, like, if Julio Jones and the rest of that Titans offense really takes off any further than it already did, Henry's going to just continue to absolutely consume. It's a PPR league, so I feel like a little juice comes out of that. That's where somebody like Chris Carson really rises up, because I think Chris Carson's been underrated for quite some time now. But that gets into semantics. Like, either way, I agree. This is really, really, really well set up. So I am now looking for a backup tight end. I think even though I've already got Tony Pollard, I'm going to just add Dalton Schultz. Every time I watched Dalton Schultz on the rest of I basically just want to throw stuff at the tight end position, see which one pops off, because I'm not too worried. And so I'm going to end up drafting a kicker here at the very, very end. But let's get back into talking through teams. Next up is the New York Knicks, who have yet to draft a DST. But outside of that, they've got Dak Prescott, DeAndre Swift, Leonard Fournette, Devante Adams, Allen Robinson, Adam Troutman, and then Corey Davis. Is this Dustin Hopkins? I was like, D. Hopkins. Better not be on the kicking spot. Then we've got Marquez Callaway. We've got Russell Gage, A.J. Green, Chuba Hubbard, Darrington Evans, Jared Goff, and Jalen Richard.
Yeah, that's a good team. Running back 2, you might get your value out of Fournette, but if you're spiking a touchdown now and then, you'll be pretty happy. Great wide receivers. Obviously, that's where they put their capital. But that's a great setup to have Adams and Robinson. I love Corey Davis in the flex. I think Corey Davis is underrated. I think he's going to soak up a lot of targets there. So I think it's probably going to be a pretty skinny tree in New York. So I would feel pretty good about your investment in that, and I would feel pretty good about that being a flex. So, yeah, I think that team's going to compete. I think we might be oversized in our expectations for Dallas, because everybody is always oversized in their expectations for Dallas
every year.
And Dak's coming back from a terrible injury.
Yep.
And so he may not be nearly as good as we think he could be. But just from the circumstances of bad defense, good offensive weapons, Dak is going to be in a position to succeed. And so that's a sound pick to want Dak to lead your team.
Mm-hmm. It's one of those where, especially given that we've got some people scraping the bottom of the barrel, which again, I'll talk about my brother, Michael, you're out there. I think Zach Wilson is risky. Risky is the operative word here. Dak, if he doesn't do well, you don't feel near as bad about it, because he was one of the most productive quarterbacks in the league last year. So as much of a bummer as it would be, I think that this does look like a really good team. It's one that I would expect to contend, but hey, we haven't looked through the rest of them. That's why we've moved on to Team Fusellini. Or is it could easily be Fusellini. I have no idea. But feel free to send me a pronunciation guide. Looking at Baker Mayfield, then Darrell Henderson, Melvin Gordon, Tyreek Hill, Mike Evans, Kyle Pitts, Curtis Samuel, Dolphins DST, Younghoe Koo, Elijah Moore, Rondell Moore, Rashad Penny, Kadarius Toney, Nick Folk, and Byron Pringle.
So it's a young team, right? I mean, you got Hill that kind of anchors it, but just a
Hill
lot
and
of
Mike
rookies.
Evans.
Yeah, Hill and Mike Evans, but then he went a lot of rookies. Baker, I think he's a solid quarterback in this format. 20 teams. I think that the Cleveland offense could be good, but they have such a strong running game that I think that there's a pretty hard ceiling on his production. So Hill's going to be your guy. Evans worries me a little bit just because he's been so nicked up over the last few years. But Hill and Evans with Baker, I can make a case. Your running back's really weak. You're going to have to get lucky there. What did you say it was a tight end?
Tight end is Kyle Pitts, which is really
Okay, so that's fun, right? And you've got some other wide receivers that might hit. So I could see this being a team that wants to trade wide receivers for running backs. If Pitts becomes the guy that we all hope that he can be early, then
huge.
That all of a sudden becomes, maybe he gets in the conversation where he's a top 5 tight end quickly. Well, now all of a sudden you've got another guy that's kind of considered a wide receiver, and your wide receiver room is really good. You might be in a position where you need to think about trading a wide receiver to try to upgrade on running back. But I mean, this seems like kind of like a B+ to me.
Nice. It sounds like a good draft. I'm with you. Darrell Henderson specifically and Melvin Gordon are two to watch in terms of hopefully that you could get your value there. Like, especially with both on bye at week 11, you got to figure something else, like something out for that. But you can also cross that bridge when you get to it in a 20-team league. We will move on for the sake of time to leave it all on the fields, who is starting Trevor Lawrence, Ezekiel Elliott, Myles Gaskin, Tony McLaurin, Julio Jones, Hunter Henry, Brandon Cooks, the Rams DSTs, Matt Gay, and then has a bench of Mike Williams, J.D. McKissick, Quandre Allison, KJ Hamler, CJ Uzoma, and Tyrod Taylor is the backup quarterback.
Okay. There's some fun players on that team. I can get behind some of that. Terry McLaurin is one of my favorite players.
I love Terry. I love Terry so much.
McLaurin to me feels like a lot like Keenan Allen and Allen Robinson, and so that's probably why I like him so much. And so that's a guy that I think came in right away and produced, despite people not really thinking he was going to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. So I really like him. So that's a fun pick. I wish I had him on my. I only did one fantasy league this year, believe it or not, because I'm trying to do other stuff. And that was one guy that I was like, dang, I wish I would have been able to get him. But I did get his teammate Gibson, Antonio Gibson, who I like quite a bit this year too, as at running back. But yeah, I mean, I can kind of understand the roster construction. I think most people know how to put together a team. Some people are, when you take swings too early, it will kind of leave you, wanting at other positions. And so that's a little bit of what maybe we'll see throughout here. But I think for the most part, people kind of understand how to build a team even in this crazy format. So
yeah, I mean, hey, a lot of this one hinges on Trevor Lawrence. It feels like every team has that starlet that they need to just pop off, and then they also have that X factor that if they produce, it makes a big difference. In this case, if Lawrence goes off, this could be a very, very good team. It just needs a little bit, it also needs something from Julio Jones, obviously. It needs Ezekiel Elliott to have a nice returning year. A couple of question marks it basically needs to answer, but outside of that, I mean, it could very well hit, and it's a 20-team league, so you got to take risks somewhere, right?
Absolutely.
Next, we get on to the Super Bowl Shuffle, who is starting Jalen Hurts with Saquon Barkley, Sony Michel, A.J. Brown, Chris Godwin, Evan Ingram, Kenny Galladay, Washington DSTs, Justin Tucker, and Paris Campbell, Marlon Mack, Boston Scott, Saints DSTs, Joshua Kelly, and James Washington on their bench.
Love the wide receivers. Those are guys that I like, all of those wide receivers. Hurts is a guy that I don't really know if he's going to meet the hype, and so that kind of scares me. People love Saquon. I hate Jason Garrett as a play caller, and so I kind of avoided the Giants. They could be okay. Saquon's obviously just an incredible talent, and he's got to return first round value for you. I have nothing against Saquon. I think he's an incredible talent. So I just don't like the team context. Makes
sense. I agree. I mean, I look at this, and for instance, the funny thing about a bad defense or a bad offense potentially in a PPR league is that every check down for your running back is a point. So there's something there. Saquon can certainly catch the ball, but he's obviously got to come back from injury, and I'm with you. I'm very injury cautious all the time. So I don't know. With Saquon, it's hard because it's what do you want me to do? Pump the brakes on Saquon Barkley? That seems a little ridiculous. Not to mention, I think Sony Michel might find a better niche than we think behind a obviously very good Rams system that should be able to back defenses off the ball with Matthew Stafford throwing the rock. But a lot of, again, questions that need to be answered. Kenny Galladay needs to live up to billing, and it may all hinge on Jalen Hurts. But hey, worst case scenario, maybe you scoop up Mac Jones off the waiver wire and do better than you think you do. If he's still there, frankly.
Who knows?
Which, I don't know. But we'll move on to our next one, which is the Hawaiian name, Kailua Oahu from Bears in Hawaii, who's got Patrick Mahomes, Miles Sanders, Ronald Jones, Brandon Ayuk, Laviska Shenault, Rob Gronkowski, Marquise Brown, the Chargers DSTs, Tyler Bass kicking the ball, with Justin Fields, Dwayne Estrisk, Damian Williams, Traquan Smith, Tony Jones, Olamide Zaccheaus, and Jarrett Patterson.
Plenty of names at the end there. I don't know, but that doesn't mean it's not good.
I was in the same place.
Yeah. Read who's the quarterback?
Sure.
And the
Patrick Mahomes with Justin Fields
okay.
backing him up, Miles
Right.
Sanders, and Ronald Jones.
Right. All right. So, I mean, Mahomes gives you a chance every week. Fields might be a trade chip, so that's probably what you're looking at. I love Ayuk. We already talked about that. I'm not going to keep going into that.
This feels
Again,
strong.
I don't love the Eagles offense. And then Rojo might be the guy, might not be the guy. He's in a great offense. And so I kind of feel like, Sanders was my guy last year. I thought he was just going to be awesome. And he just kind of came on down the stretch, but he wasn't that good for most of the year. So I don't want a lot of investment in that offense. They've got to play the Giants twice, who are excellent. Their defense is going to be excellent. And they've got to play Washington twice, who has a great defense. They get to play Dallas twice, so that's good.
Oh, gosh. Case is telling me that I probably drafted a backup kicker, which, good on me. I thought I was going through and let me see.
Did you really?
Well, I thought that I was looking at it and hadn't seen the Carolina kicker drafted yet. But then again, I made the assumption that Graham Gano got moved, so I don't know.
Go to
what I
your
was
team.
Thinking.
We should go to your team.
Oh, good. You really want to go over my team?
Yeah, because I'm not sure that we did that well.
We've got Lamar Jackson, Nick Chubb, Trey Sermon, Keenan Allen, Robbie Anderson, Austin Hooper, Zack Moss, Browns DSTs, Ryan Santozo, which if not, I'll find some backup kicker, no worries. Tony Pollard, Rashad Bateman, Van Jefferson, Donovan Peoples-Jones, Carson Wentz, Hayden Hurst, and Dalton Schultz.
Okay.
What?
Do we have 3 tight ends?
We do. We do have 3 tight ends.
Okay.
I wanted one
All
of
right.
them to work, and I felt pretty
Okay.
confident in the rest of the roster.
Okay. All right.
What?
No,
You're not
it's
thinking
fine.
it's very
I mean-
good, are you?
Well, I mean, if we were going to,
You can come after me. I can handle it.
If we were going to critique our own roster, I would say that we took the chance on Sermon. Moss is going to be, so we're going to play Moss or Sermon, and I think that's justifiable
Or Bateman. Oh, wait.
Bateman's going to be the flex.
That's what I was thinking. I
Right.
had the flex in mind, so you're right.
Probably.
Either Moss or Sermon plays.
Yes, they're going to be the RB2. You hope that one of those provides you RB2 value. I think that the wide receiver picks were safe. I mean, Keenan Allen's a top producer in PPR.
Right.
It's a really strong pick. Robbie Anderson, I think, is a safe wide receiver 2 pick. And then I think that Bateman is a guy that can come on and play right away. It's still a little bit of a risk. And then we've got some lottery tickets late with like Van Jefferson, guys like that, right? So I think that there's some. I think it's a fine roster construction. In hindsight, maybe we would wait a little longer on quarterback because quarterbacks didn't go as quite as fast as we thought they would. That stuff happens. We didn't take a tight end high, but I think Hooper is it's a fine choice. And so I think that it's a team that probably all teams need a break or two to work.
Right.
You'll probably be in the middle of the pack, but maybe
I was going to say, the more I look at this, the more I see a roster that isn't bad. I just don't know if it's
not
good.
bad.
Like,
Right.
That's the key here, right? You say you're putting it really well, that you look at a guy like Robbie Anderson, and he's not going to take over a game and potentially win you one like Julio Jones, probably, regardless of how good a football player I think he is. But he's not going to be the reason you lost either. You're probably not going to look at Robbie Anderson at a specific week and go, Robbie, you gave me nothing. You know what I mean? But, hey, you know what? If somehow Trey Sermon wins the lion's share of the backfield, this could be a more competitive team than we think. I also think that if Nick Chubb, if he can just do what Melvin Ingram used to do and just catch a whole bunch of screen passes, or Mark Ingram, that is, maybe you get a little further along, but he's not going to be an Austin Eckler. So, not worried about the team, but also it needs a break or two.
As all teams do.
Yep. We will then move on, seeing if we can't go through quite a few of these. We've got the Chads up next, who have Matthew Stafford, Aaron Jones, Devin Singletary, Tyler Lockett, Michael Thomas, Jared Cook, Henry Ruggs, Patriots DSTs, Cairo Santos, Derek Carr, Desean Jackson, Jimmy Graham, Dawson Knox, Panthers DSTs, Kendrick Bourne, and Gardner Minshew.
How about we do this? Because I try to listen to all of them, and then I get lost. So maybe we just do the starting lineups.
Oh, I hope it shows up on the stream by the time I've read them all.
Oh, maybe. I can't really see it, so I need to...
Let me see if I can go to the actual team like widget and show them a little bit bigger. Let's see. Because then we go to members in the league. We go to Chad's down here. And then can you see this a little stronger? Remember, Matthew Stafford, Aaron Jones, Devin Singletary, Tyler Lockett, Michael Thomas, Jared Cook, Henry Ruggs, Patriots DST, Cairo Santos.
Thomas is a gamble. That's definitely something that we'll see. I mean, I don't think he's happy there, and he really botched his own surgery or recover, all that stuff. There's some weird stuff going on there with Michael Thomas, so that worries me a little bit. I really do like Stafford in LA. I think that McVay is going to unlock him, and he's going to be great. I mean, he was great in Detroit, particularly from a fantasy standpoint. Like, I know Bears fans don't want to admit that, but he absolutely was. He's a really good quarterback. Oh, yeah. And now you put him in with the best offensive line in the league. It is a great recipe. And so I really like Stafford. He's not going to obviously give you much with his legs, but after you get those top tier guys, I think Stafford's as good as anybody. Lockett is a guy that I really like. Probably be better if he was your second, but what are you going to do in a league this big? Of course, I don't draft Packers, but obviously Aaron Jones is talented. So, this team probably has to have some breaks to it. There's a lot of chances that were taken. This team would worry me a little bit.
That's the magic of fantasy, right?
100%. 100%.
You take those chances on the guys that you've got the inside scoop on them, right?
Right.
I remember I got laughed at one point. I think it was, it must have been like 2016, Jeff. Gosh, I'm getting older. But I remember I drafted in like the 7th or 8th round a little known guy named, holy cow, Stephon Diggs. Because I was like, Stephon Diggs is going to go off. It was his sophomore year. I was like, it doesn't matter who the quarterback is. Stephon Diggs is too good because he had just blown the Bears up in like their second meeting. Lo and behold, he was one of the best receivers in fantasy that year, like in the world of things. And when you have that guy, it obviously comes in huge, but just stinks when you think you've got him and then it turns out you don't,
All right, who's next?
Yep, let's do it. All right, so next up, we've got, let's go back and through. We've got Las Vegas Field of Dreams with Aaron Rodgers, David Montgomery, Raheem Mostert.
Hated already with Rodgers, but go on.
Tyler Boyd, Jalen Reagor, George Kittle, Mecole Hardman, Buccaneers DSTs, Ryan Suckup, and then hopefully you could just take a look at their bench from there. Can you see this a little better?
Yeah, I can. We're still on Chad's on the
live, but it'll get there. Like you've got enough to go off of the starters.
Yeah, I think that I see what happens is when you take Kittle that high, you're pushing everything down. Running backs are solid. Rodgers is going to keep you in every week. Unfortunately, obviously, you need Mecole Hardman to be a guy. And that'll help a lot because Boyd I think is the 3 in Cincinnati. Reagor, again, I'm not thrilled in that offense. Is Hardman going to be the 4th target? Is that going to be enough for him to be relevant in a great offense? We'll see. So, this is what happens when you take Kittle and Rodgers. When you take a tight end and a quarterback that early, then the rest of the value gets pushed down. And so you're going to need some stuff to hit.
You're going to need that David Montgomery dollar to go through, right?
Well, Montgomery's probably going to be solid, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he's going to ever be like a top 5 running back. You hope that he's just going to be solid. Mm-hmm. And then getting into the San Francisco backfield, obviously you're hoping for a bigger part of the share. They might run through a lot of guys. We're obviously hoping our guy hits a little more.
Right.
We'll see.
Mm-hmm. Next up, we have got Baskin Robinson, who did not acquire Allen Robinson, but I'm sure they did their best. Russell Wilson, Austin Eckler, Mike Davis, Antonio Brown, Jalen Waddle, Darren Waller, Tyrell Williams, 49ers DSTs, and Michael Badgley.
All right. Well, I love the running backs. Obviously, I love Eckler, and I think Davis is great value. I think that he's going to do a lot of good as the only real option there in Atlanta. And so that I like a lot. We all love Russell Wilson around here.
Of course.
You'll never hear me say anything bad about Russell Wilson. He'll consistently be a top option at quarterback. Antonio Brown is your wide receiver one. Okay. Well, we'll see. That would worry me quite a bit. And then obviously relying on a rookie for your wide receiver too. But, I mean, you put all your capital into the running back room, and I understand why with a league like this. So I would be worried about Antonio Brown that high, counting on him to be that much of a playmaker.
I feel like Jamison Crowder could surprise a little bit, but obviously when we're that's primarily because we're looking at Antonio Brown, Jalen Waddle, and Tyrell Williams, and then Jamison Crowder as like wide receiver 1, 2, 3, 4, if I'm reading it correctly. So slightly weaker wide receiver room, but hey, we've seen a lot of these that are skewed way towards the wide receivers. Like this is that running back room that came in hot between Russell Wilson, Austin Eckler, and Mike Davis on a decent to good week. You may have the game won already. I
think James White's probably going to play in your flex.
Mm-hmm. I think
if he has the role that we think he could have. I mean, his role might change. But
Mike Swing, you asked about the playoff teams. Probably. There's a whole lot of this stuff that, honestly, me and Elon, the person who commissioned the league, haven't worked out. So we will get all of that stuff sorted as we go through here. Don't worry about a lot of that. And then, Alex, 20 teams in this league. Next up, the Chicago Flight, who are starting Ryan Tannehill, Jonathan Taylor, Chase Edmonds, DeAndre Hopkins, Chase Claypool, Robert Tonyan, David Johnson, the Bills DSTs, and Robbie Gould.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's a solid team build. You're hoping Tonyan spikes touchdowns. I mean, he finished pretty high in the tight end room last year.
Right.
Tannehill. The thing that worries me about Tannehill and that Titans offense is that they lost Arthur Smith. And so you wonder, are they going to be able to get that same efficiency out of Ryan Tannehill once he's gone? He does have the Julio bump. And so, and A.J. Brown's a star. And so between those two guys and a strong running game, you're hoping for solid quarterback play out of Ryan Tannehill. He's not going to probably win you a lot of weeks, though. I mean, he's a very efficient quarterback. He's probably better in real life than he is in fantasy. I love Jonathan Taylor. That's a strong pick. And I'd be very excited about what Taylor can do behind that offensive line. Mm-hmm. So again, it's a solid build.
What interests me about this team as I look at it is that I don't have a good feel for who's going to inevitably be their flex. The last guy we looked at, for instance, the last team involved a whole lot of options at flex, whether it was Tyrell Williams, whether it was James White. Like you had some options where if one of them wasn't performing or one of them had a nice matchup, you could roll with that. Whereas, and granted, a lot of that's because I don't actually have a great read on Terrence Marshall and Devontae Booker and not Anthony Frisker, but Zach Pascal. Like you may have a better, honestly, you may have a much better understanding of me on where those guys are. I just know that the Houston offense is one that I would avoid. I think
it'll probably be Marshall. I think that they want him to emerge, and he's just physically gifted, and so I could see Marshall.
Well, Sam Darnold, a 3 wide receiver passer, if I've ever seen one, right?
Well, I mean, I'm not wanting to invest in Sam Darnold or anything, but I do think that sometimes the wide receiver talent is what the wide receiver talent is. And
right.
You can chase that, but I think that's probably that would be my bet.
Mm-hmm.
But Claypool was great last year in stretches.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you've got D-Hop, you've got Nuke. Taylor and Nuke, that's a strong start.
I think
for anybody.
I think another thing before we move on to the next one, because I know time is getting short at this point, draft having concluded, but you talked about how Tannehill's not going to win you a lot of weeks. I do feel like there are some quarterbacks. Let's take Joe Burrow, decent example, right? If the Cincinnati offense gets absolutely shuttered then Joe Burrow may lose you a week, depending on who you've got. Ryan Tannehill is probably not going to win you a week over, say, Aaron Rodgers, but he might keep it close in a league that could very easily be dominated by the quarterback play. Does that make sense?
Saying he won't lose you a league.
Right. It's the whole, I may be down 8 points, but I hope DeAndre Hopkins and Chase Claypool can make that up. You know what I mean?
Much rather have Joe Burrow than Ryan Tannehill.
Ooh.
Much rather.
I'm really
I have no
worried
idea
about
where they're
Burrow
ranked, but they would be much greater ranked for me. Burrow would. That's a big separation for me.
This next team, speaking of, is really interesting because this is the one with Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston starts alongside Najee Harris, Michael Carter, Justin Jefferson, T. Higgins, T.J. Hawkinson, Michael Pittman, the Chiefs DSTs, and Mason Crosby. What do you think?
All right, give them to me again. I had to go look up rankings and look like Tannehill is actually ranked higher than Burrow on the rankings that I had pulled up. So apologies to the person I just dragged, but for me, I would much rather have Burrow in that offense because I do think that Tennessee is going to be on the down a little bit because they lose Arthur Smith, and I think he's more of an efficient quarterback. Where I think that Burrow, with the pace and with all the weapons and the fact that their defense is going to be very good, they're going to be coming from behind. I think he's going to be a better fantasy quarterback for sure. And I think he's just a better quarterback. I'm super impressed with Burrow. So, and I've been a Tannehill defender for a long time. So anyway, all right. I can kind of see it here. Winston,
Harris, Carter, Justin Jefferson, T. Higgins, T.J. Hawkinson, Michael Pittman, Chiefs DST, Mason Crosby.
So I love T. Higgins. I've already talked about that, so I won't get into that. I do think Michael Carter is a fun pick for the Jets. I think he's going to probably emerge as being the guy. Harris, everybody loves. Obviously Pittsburgh's going to take Harris, and then they did. I hate their offensive line. Their offensive line had a lot of moving parts. And I've been joking all offseason that they did it on purpose to punish Ben Roethlisberger for not retiring and saving them money because Roethlisberger came back and they're like, oh crap, we have to pay this guy. Like, what do we do? And they just didn't do anything to that offensive line. I think their offensive line is going to be terrible. And so, Harris is going to have plenty of volume, but he's going to just ram himself into the defensive line 20 times a game. I don't know, man. People are kind of in love with him, and I think it's going to be a rough start for him. I'm just not sure how much talent he has to overcome a bad offensive line and a scheme that, I know the Steelers started off as 10-0 last year, 11-0 or something.
Really good. That's all I remember.
They were so no explosion in their offense.
Right.
And so I don't know. I would worry about the Steelers offense a little bit.
I feel like Jameis Winston's the linchpin of this. If he hits, you hit. Because like you're talking about, at least you've got volume with Najee, right? Even if the Steelers offense really struggles, you've got a guy that's going to take a ton of carries.
Right.
Hawkinson's obviously another good question. I know Jared Goff likes to use the tight ends, but I also know that Jared Goff is now outside McVay's system. So what's he going to look like? I don't really know.
I think Hawkinson's, for a 20-team league, he's a fine tight end. I don't think it moves the needle. Obviously, I think you're counting on Jefferson to be your star, which he is. He's a star. That means you got to rely on Kirk Cousins a little bit, which okay.
Now you're cheered for a rival again.
Yeah, that's just what I'm saying. I like Justin Jefferson. I wouldn't mind having him on my team, but I don't mind having Vikings.
By the way,
I would never draft Kirk Cousins, but
I couldn't explain this, but I love the Barry Manilow's pun right there. I think that's great. Very solid name. All right, we got 3 more to do, Jeff, and then we'll close up. Chicago Moon, Justin Herbert, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Damian Harris, Stephon Diggs, DJ Chark, Jonnu Smith, T.Y. Hilton, Bears DST, Jason Sanders.
All right, so T.Y.'s hurt right now, so that would be probably not going to play T.Y. Early. So I would at least remember that is what are the other options for them in terms of creating a starting lineup. I think that this is the one that you try to drag for drafting CEH, and I think it's a pretty good room here.
I am not trying to drag CEH. I was just disappointed. Okay.
I love Justin Herbert. Obviously, I already mentioned that my second team is the Chargers, and so I love Herbert. I think he could just take that next step where I truly believe that if the Chargers do what I think they're going to do, you're going to start hearing people talk about Justin Herbert in the MVP conversation.
Mm-hmm. Ooh.
He's not going to be the MVP. That's going to be Josh Allen. I totally believe it's going to be Josh Allen. It's all set up for Josh Allen.
You're thinking that he will be
I think people are going to start talking about him.
Right. He'll be similar to Josh Allen this last year, where he very clearly and vocally makes the case that he deserves to be at least in the future conversation, even if he doesn't win it that year.
Right. So his favorite receiver, Stephon Diggs, is on this team. So this, I love Herbert. I love Diggs. I like Chark. I like Shenault a little more, but I like Chark. I think that the Jacksonville offense provides a lot of value at draft tables right now. I think getting in the Chiefs offense with Clyde Edwards-Helaire is smart. Maybe he's not going to live up to lofty expectations that we have for that, but I like taking a guy like that in his second year to see if he can kind of step into more of a role. I think the tight end's solid. To me, this turns out to me to be a really solid build team, and I think it has a lot of upside.
Good job, Audrey. Way to go, because this is actually drafted by a first-time fantasy person. You did
a good job, Audrey.
I love the Irv Smith pick here. I think Mac Jones is an interesting QB to hang on to, because I certainly think he's going to end up starting. Good question on what that New England offense is really going to look like in terms of efficiency. But hey, 20-team league. You got to just go where you go. Next up, we've got Team Mike Cause here, which is Ryan Fitzpatrick, Javonte Williams, Nyheim Hines, Calvin Ridley, DK Metcalf, Mike Gesicki, Jerry Jeudy, Giants DST, Matt Prater. With actually some pretty surprising bench folks that I got to mention, namely talking about Jarvis Landry here.
Mm-hmm. All right, so you've got a great wide receiver room. I mean, Calvin Ridley is going to be incredible this year.
Yep.
I've got a small bet on Calvin Ridley to lead the league in receiving yards. I think he can totally do that this year with Julio gone. He was already incredibly productive in that offense. I like Fitzpatrick this year. I think he's in a really good situation to succeed. I've talked about it before that Fitzpatrick is the kind of guy that you would love to pair with Justin Fields or a Trey Lance, so that when those guys take over, you've held firm with a really fun quarterback. And I mean, there's no one more fun to own in fantasy than Ryan
Fitzpatrick. Absolutely.
He's going to have some weeks where he's just going to dominate, and he's going to have a week or two where he's probably going to throw it to the other team more than he'd like, and he might lose you a week. That's going to happen. But Fitzpatrick's a lot of fun to own. DK Metcalf obviously is a lot of fun to own. Calvin Ridley, to me, is a lot of fun to own. Maybe he has plenty of highlights. He's just a different kind of highlight guy. Mm-hmm. Jerry Jeudy, he's a guy that could be a big highlight guy. So I could see this person kind of feeling the fun vibes of fantasy football with their team build here.
The exact opposite of my team. I'll say it. My team is Lamar and a whole bunch of safe choices. Whereas
you've got some shapes, and I kind of talked you into Lamar, which maybe I shouldn't have because of the quarterback room. But
no, that would have been fine. My bet would have been to play late for Trey Lance, but I also get really I'm holding too many limes when it comes to skill position players. So you really helped me through there.
With Lance, that you couldn't have waited too long, because I think you thought you could get him a little later, and I think those guys went 2 rounds earlier than you thought they would.
Right.
But I think that this team, if nothing else, this person's going to have fun. Mm-hmm. And this might be, I would say this is one of the better teams that I've seen, just because
that wide receiver room stacked out of its mind.
It could hit pretty good. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Here we go. We've got the final team, the Ferrari Fields Maserati Mitch. So you got both Bears big names right there. fast team, obviously by name. Matt Ryan, Antonio Gibson, Joe Mixon, DJ Moore, Odell Beckham Jr., Dallas Goedert, Marvin Jones, Broncos DSTs, and Harrison Butker.
I mean, Matt Ryan's the most boring pick, and this is like the opposite of taking someone that's dynamic and fun. And Matt Ryan's super boring, but he's productive and he's safe, right?
Yep.
Like this is the safest possible quarterback pick that you can have. Like Mixon's not my favorite player, just because I don't think that the Bengals offensive line is good. It was a train wreck last year. They've made some inroads to try to fix it, not nearly as many as I think they should have. And so Mixon isn't my favorite, but it's tons of volume. And so he's super safe in that respect. I love Antonio Gibson though. And so that makes me really like this team overall, because Matt Ryan's been a guy that I've had on fantasy forever because he's always a discount because he's not exciting. And that's I like those guys, like, because you can get them a couple rounds later than what their production tells you, and so I'm sure that happened here as well. So between Gibson and Ryan and Mixon, who I think other people are higher on than me, but that's fine. DJ Moore is a good player. I mean, again, it's a defensible team build. Mm-hmm. Marvin Jones is another guy that outproduces his
status,
his draft, average draft position all the time. And so, if you can, that's boring, but that's a good way to build a team. A lot of times just take value that falls to you.
Absolutely. I can't agree with that more. And with that, we wrap up this wild 20-team draft. Yeah, Elon, you were first, so feel free to go back and check through the replay to catch your big review. Jeff, thank you so much for jumping on. I think this will be a really interesting season, very interesting league, and I may throw an update in here or there, whether it's on Twitter or whatever, because I am curious to see how this shakes out over the next season. But I think, if anything, this just reminds me how excited I am for the 2021 NFL season, and I can't wait for it to start. You have anything to say before we close up?
Fantasy's all about having fun. So just enjoy, make some trades. Making trades is always fun. Don't worry about, getting the best of a trade. If you think that it makes your team better, pull the trigger, make the trade. Don't worry about losing the trade. I always get frustrated by people they always need, 150% of the return to get back. Don't worry about that. Just have fun, go out and get players that you like, treat your league mates well. Don't offer them crappy trades, and don't try to rip people off, or hey, take these 3 bench players for your star. Don't do that stuff. Treat them with respect, have fun, and just enjoy football. And it's almost back.
Absolutely. I mean, hey, as far as those of y'all still with us, it should be funny to see how this goes, because I could see it being a little bit more trade heavy since we don't really have a waiver to go through, but we'll have to see how it all goes. It's going to be an interesting league to play in, certainly. Jeff, I feel like I learned so much from you today about fantasy football and just general league consensus. So thank you so much for hanging on. Folks, feel free to catch us, catch more analysis across this channel throughout the rest of the week. Chances are we'll be talking, obviously, about the last preseason game, Justin Fields, always Justin Fields, and more. Keep your eye on Windy City Gridiron for tons of new content every single day. Until next time, I guess I don't really have anything else specifically to say, given, we just put in another 2-hour, that was a 3-hour stream. So Jeff, way to go. What'd you think of live streaming? It's not your first time live streaming, but how you feeling about the rest of this year?
I'd love to do more of it. We'll get the rest of my room figured out. We're remodeling to put together a streaming area, so ready to go.
Yeah, there you go. You gotta get in the streaming. There you go. But thanks so much for joining, friends. Always awesome to see y'all. Keep in touch. Make sure you follow Jeff on Twitter at GridironBorn. That's Gridiron, like GridironBorn. for great analysis on all things fantasy and general football, Bears, so on and so forth. And I'm over at Robert K. Schmitz. But yeah, awesome having y'all on board. Thanks so much. Talk to y'all soon.